Caught at Sea, the shocking truth about cruise ship stowaways. There was an episode of This American Life, I think, where a woman did this, but back in the day, like the 60s or early 70s. There were seating charts or something in the dining room, so she couldn't sneak in to eat, and things that she assumed would be open most nights, like bars, weren't. She lived on a lot of bar garnishes and had to pretend she was a drunk who kept passing out in the lounge. It was a lot less fun than she thought it would be, with very little sleep and cleaning herself up in public bathrooms, while worrying she'd be caught doing so at any time. She had to sneak back into her own country because she hadn't bought a passport. There were also a few occasions where she came close to being possibly the victim of the unspeakable act, because one of her methods for fitting in involved being flirty with the single men on board, and more than once she had to extricate herself from an overly touchy guy, and once she also woke up to a crew member with his hands down her top. I work for Carnival. We will find you. We know you're in the ship. We all want you to get off so I can take a short nap before I have to do it all again in a few hours. Amen to that. I worked for a small cruise ship company, like less than 100 people, and I'd die a little inside every time people weren't packed in the morning of departure and would slow everything down. Did they somehow forget that they needed to get off the boat that morning? Do these big ships do same-day turns, like debarkation and embarkation the same day? My company did that, and apparently it's not the norm, at least in small cruise ships. Most of the other companies seemed to have at least 24 hours between trips. This one couple decided to try and get another week out of their holiday. This was while we were halfway through our holiday, so we heard it all. Dozens of announcements calling for them or anyone who's seen them were made throughout the day. Their rooms were searched and everything they owned in that room was seized, apparently. The ship left port late by about 90 minutes, but they were eventually found and escorted off the ship when the crew decided to check the identity of every passenger on board. Wait, all of their stuff was left in their room? How did they think they'd get away with that? Did they think life was on GTA rules? If you hide long enough without being seen, you'll be free to go? I don't know if this counts, but on the last night of a cruise, my friends and I got really drunk. Well, I don't know how the heck, but I ended up somewhere passengers shouldn't be, in a gosh darn supply closet, I believe. The ship had docked and there was a 2-hour search for me. Still drunk, I couldn't find a way out of the room where the supply closet was, because the door was locked. The crew thought I was trying to sneak another ride, but after reviewing the cameras, they could clearly tell I was nowhere near sober. So they sent me on my way with a good laugh. To this day, I still don't remember making my way down there. That's kind of adorable somehow. I can imagine them all bringing up the security footage like, what a jerk, we'll see how sneakily he planned this. Oh, wow, he's real drunk and real confused, isn't he? The magic of drunk people never ceases to amaze me. Teleporting through locked steel doors, ending up on the roofs of buildings, climbing things they probably wouldn't be able to climb while sober. You crazy, problematic magicians. This one is actually really funny, and almost certainly not the only time it's happened, I bet. Okay, so this one wasn't a cruise, but a ferry. Also, we didn't hide on purpose. It was the ferry from Soirée, Prince Edward Island to the Île de la Madeleine, Quebec, Canada. A 12-hour ride. We embarked at 2 a.m. and found a very quiet spot to sleep. We slept through the landing and nobody woke us up because nobody actually saw us. When we woke up, we saw the islands going away from us. As a result, we spent 36 hours on that boat. You might enjoy having a listen to the Stowaway episode of the podcast Criminal. It's not somebody who just didn't leave, but somebody who plotted to go on a cruise without paying. It's a good listen. I don't think it would work today though, and it sounded like she really didn't have a good time on the boat anyway, with no place to sleep and nothing but buffet snacks, not having to mention constantly being worried about being found out. It's all electronic card swipe now, and everyone monitored all the time. All the japes and scrapes of being a stowaway, one step ahead of the steward, is in the past now. I used to be in the US Coast Guard. We had this happen a few times in Miami. They were all escorted off the ship. Typically, the police handle the situation, but if a stowaway was discovered while in the 3 to 12 mile range, we'd render assistance once they were apprehended by the on-board law enforcement. I mean, the problem here is that you only know about the unsuccessful stowaways, not the ones that managed to pull it off. Also, is keel hauling still an acceptable punishment for stowing away? I don't know if this counts, but my dad got locked in a toilet cubicle on a ferry to France, and it took several people to find him. The toilet was right out of the way, and you couldn't even hear him yelling, even right outside in the corridor because the doors were so massive. I guess he could have gone immediately back to England? Could have been a ship toilet hermit. I'm sure something similar has happened many times on the ferry between Helsinki and Tallinn. The ferry company even offers a 6-hour mini cruise where you board the ship in Helsinki, travel to Tallinn, then stay on board for the return journey to Helsinki. We went on one of those for our company Christmas party a few years ago. When the ship arrived in Tallinn, the personnel on the ship didn't check in any way to make sure the people who stayed on the ship were supposed to be there. A drunk passenger could very easily forget to get off the ship and end up going along for the ride back to Helsinki. I worked for Carnival for 5 years, specifically in Debarkation. Additionally, I worked for Disney Cruise Line and Princess Cruise Line. So here's what happens. We give you a card upon check-in, and that card is scanned the minute you step on board. Additionally, it's scanned when you leave the ship for either complete debarkation or excursions. At the end of the cruise, debarkation starts around 7 a.m. Come 10 a.m., we receive a list of people who haven't yet had their cards scanned. It's impossible to get off the boat without getting your card scanned unless you jump into the water. Then a manhunt begins to get you guys off the ship so we can put on a new 2,500 cattle. We don't start boarding new passengers until every card from the previous voyage has been scanned. In my experience, nobody ever waits and tries to hide. If you do take a cruise, book a flight that's a little bit later in the morning and go with the latest checkout time you can. So many people aim for debarking at around 7 to 9 a.m. Literally over 1,700 people will be waiting in lines that'll take well over an hour to get out of. Instead of waiting in the line for the hour, stay on board and eat some breakfast, take some last-minute photos, and then when your time comes, just leave, go through customs, and be on your merry way. This sounds US-specific though. Here in Sweden, there are some really low-class party cruises on the Baltic Sea. We call them the F-boats. They don't scan anyone there. And I guess there are all different levels in the world in between up to the luxury stuff. So not all cruises can scan people. You know, as someone about to embark on a cruise, this could hold vital information. Ships tend to have really good tracking of their people. There's security cameras everywhere, and when you disembark, they give the ship a really good walkthrough. All the passenger areas are easy to see through and have no hiding places, and if a person were to be in a storage area, it happened every now and again, we'd notice immediately. I've never had passengers try to stow away, but I've definitely seen crew run away from the ship. It mostly happens in American ports. Personally, when I was working on ships, I couldn't wait to be the F off them every time I saw land. Why people cruise to begin with is beyond my comprehension. This is a little different. I was going through a really hard bout of depression in 2012 and really had nothing going on in life besides an overnight job at a gym. My parents decided to do a family cruise in March as our Christmas present. I was actually planning on saying goodbye to my family at the end of the trip and just getting off at the last island and not getting back on. Then I found out that the cruise company would alert local authorities that I didn't get back on. I wanted to just island skip for a while instead of backpacking through Europe to do some thinking and adventuring. I didn't want to end up in some crappy Caribbean jail. I'm a stand-up comic who works on cruise ships 3 or 4 months out of the year. Guests who take forever to leave suck. Employees of the ship can't leave until every last guest has exited the vessel. So, if a guest is taking their time to leave or hiding, they're potentially keeping over 100 employees from going home. And many of the employees are on the ship for like 8 months, so every second counts when they just want to get off and start heading home. Get the F off the boat. I just want to laser focus in on one thing here. As a guy who's dabbled in stand-up, I'm not sure if I'd consider myself having made it or completely failed if I worked as a boat stand-up. On the one hand, great relative security. On the other, you're doing it on a cruise ship. But honestly, I know some of these sorts of jobs pay relatively well, and you can probably practice back on shore or quit when you want to. So honestly, congrats on getting ongoing paid gigs there. My friend did this. He can't handle his drink, and we were on a mini cruise from Newcastle to Amsterdam. After a good few drinks, he just loses it. Rips a table from the wall and throws it away, took his top off as well as another friend's top and threw them overboard while shouting, "Way!" He was quickly sent to the brig and had his passport confiscated, meaning he couldn't get back on the boat after our day in Amsterdam. So he tried to hide under the bed. According to his story, he couldn't fit, so his feet were sticking out a bit and he said he got caught straight away. They threw him off and we never saw him that day. Imaginably, when we got back on the boat, to no friend under the bed, we were concerned. We chose his closest friend to call his dad to say, "We've lost your son." And his answer was, "Oh, I know, we booked him a flight." Turns out he ventured off the boat in a panic, somehow managed to find a British embassy and explained his situation. I'm not sure how, but they organized him to fly home without a passport. Every time I see him, I ask him to tell me the story again for a laugh. An ex-girlfriend of mine was an onboard cruise photographer. I remember asking her something similar before, and she told me they swipe on and swipe off everyone on every stop, every time. She did say that she'd known people to try and stow away, but basically it turns into a massive frickin' Easter egg hunt to find the person. The liner she was on always awarded the staff member that found out the person with some kind of bonus, but she never told me what it was. I remember her saying that someone caused a ship to be something like 6 hours late to leave because they'd done such a good job at hiding. Eventually, they were found or gave themselves up, and they were arrested by port authorities. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Every cruise ship has an employee section that includes a club and bar area. I once got access after hitting on a bartender. Beers were $1 and everyone was wasted. That's an area I'd look into. You'll never find it on your own and definitely need an employee to show you how to get in. Dude, this could be any or all of the following: a life pro tip, a life hack, or how to vacation frugally. Seriously. The crew bar is the only entertainment available after work. On my ship, you could easily walk into the crew areas since the doors were never locked, but guests would easily stick out if you're not wearing a crew name tag. Every employee on the ship is required to wear their name tag when on plain clothes. Your employee ID is also your cabin key and ship debit card. Security would stop and question you if you're not wearing a crew name tag or ID. While I won't rule it out as an impossibility nowadays, it would be extremely difficult. First, you're scanned on and off the ship so they'd know you'd never got off. So now you're hiding on the ship. What the frick are you gonna do? You won't be able to get back into or out of your room. You won't be able to eat or drink on some of the cruises since you'll need a valid keycard or wristband. You'll be carrying all of your stuff around since you'll have nowhere to store it. You might make it to the first port without being caught, but then you'd probably want off, and then when you get scanned off, you're busted. I'd say it's 99.9% likely that you'll spend your stowaway cruise in the ship's jail cell until you get back to home port. I was on a ship traveling from Portugal to China. We took a wrong turn somewhere, landed on a remote island, and now the captain's enslaving all the locals. I found some crew clothing in the laundry and put it on. The crew was changing out at the last stop, so nobody would recognize my new face. In the 2 days before the ending of one round and the start of the next leg, I found myself enjoying the nods of other crew members and a level of respect I wasn't used to having dressed as a normal passenger. I decided that I'd chat up some of the bar staff and see if I had any luck getting free drinks. After a few beers, this new bartender came on. An old British guy, looked like he'd seen some stuff. He had a nickname for everyone: governor, amigo, pal, comrade. I guess he really traveled a lot. He kept serving me drinks with a sly wink, like from one old sea dog to another. It came time to settle my bill as the ship was prepping for departure, and when I went to give him money, sure enough, he told me I didn't have to pay. "No, sir," he said. "This one's on me, Cap'n. No trouble at all. Good luck getting us out of dock," and he pointed over my shoulder with his chin. I turned around, and the rest of the bridge crew was there with a security detail. Boarded for a trip from Southampton to Queenstown. Stayed on to get to New York. All was well until we hit a damn iceberg. It's been 107 years and still haven't docked. It frickin' sucks, man. At least the water is heating up finally, though. Look guys, stowaways wouldn't happen. You have to check out with your cruise card or ID. If you aren't checked out, they'll announce on the intercom to check out while sending out teams to look for you. After 20 minutes, they'll announce again, upping the ante saying you're in violation of maritime law. Once they find you, you're never going on a cruise again and will face a hefty fine. My source? A friend worked for cruise lines for 4 years. Day 247. They still don't realize. I've been living off of seawater and Ritz crackers for the past month. I can't let them see me in the cafeteria. People tell me all the time, "Dude, just leave the boat," but none of them understand. Using the quarters I find on the ground, I was finally able to pay my cell phone bill again today. I got a text from some guy named Boss, dumb name, telling me that he's gonna put me in a thing of fire. Whatever, probably insane. I got a scam text from some guy named Jane calling me husband, and from police. Regardless, I'm probably going to fry up the phone's battery for more fire today. I sometimes wonder what life is like outside the ship, but I quickly dismiss those thoughts after I realize that there's no such thing as living outside of the ship. Around day 50 or 60, people in blue coats began to hound me, saying that I've got to go or they're going to find me or something. They're probably just smack addicts, though they scared me enough to go incognito until they were gone. If you hadn't realized it, we've now gotten to the section of the answers that are almost entirely fictional or therefore the lols, as the kids are saying 15 years ago. Seems like the general consensus is that it's very hard to be a stowaway these days, and you're in big trouble if you get caught. I'm a cruise ship worker for Royal Caribbean. This is actually a pretty regular occurrence, probably happening about once a month or every other month. My favorite was when someone had taken a little too much A and locked themselves in the bathroom because they were with their family and didn't want them to find out. The cruise docked, and when it was time to go, the family was panicking trying to find him. Security eventually found him, and he admitted that he was planning to leave his family here while he did the cruise a second time. Honestly, there was no way he could have gotten away with this, because they make sure everyone is off the boat before we let more people on, and if we didn't find him, then the cleaning crew would have. I was on a cruise where a guy tried to climb down the ship into the lifeboats. Of course, he fell overboard and died in the water, and we all woke up a few days before Christmas to a cruise worker on a jet ski pulling his waterlogged corpse out of the ocean, so I can't recommend it. But hey, his ghost is probably still there. Don't do it on a Disney cruise. Hours of brutal torture at the hands of Goofy will mess up your world. The last time I heard his I had a flashback, and 8 months of therapy was undone. Do you want to be waterboarded by an anthro dog? Do you want to hear him sing, "When you wish upon a star," while putting out cigarettes on your arm? Just don't do it, bro. My ex told me this story. When we split up, he said he was messed up mentally about it. Sure, Jerry, if that's your excuse, then fine. So he went on a singles cruise with his buddy. The problem was, he was in his early 30s and everyone else was like 45 plus. So the cruise isn't helping with his mood at all until they land in Jamaica, and he and his buddy take a taxi to some bar in the bush. There he meets a pretty girl, wins a game of pool, and life feels good again. They hear the warning signal for the cruise, so they get back on the boat. My ex was shook and didn't want to continue, so he put important documents in a plastic bag and jumped off the boat. Although he's a newfie, he swims like a rock, and Jamaican authorities had to rescue him. Then they questioned him for 24 hours. Are you sane? Do you have money to get home? Until he was eventually able to call the bar chick he'd met to verify his story. They released him and gave him 3 weeks to visit or play on the island. The rest of the story is pretty boring. He stayed and played hide the baby carrot for a few weeks until he started getting hit up for money all the time. But the funny thing is, I met a guy from Jamaica. I live in northern Canada, by the way, and I told him this story and he knew about it. Apparently, my ex is island law now. I tried it once. There was a homeless man called Harry who had stowed away as well, and I got talking to him. Turns out that he helped some rich guy out who rewarded him with a ticket for the cruise ship. The captain wasn't too pleased because he looked kind of scruffy and this was a nice-looking ship. So the captain let him stay, but he was only allowed to use the facilities at night and had to sleep in a maintenance room. The cruise was quite big, so he had quite a lot to choose from. There was a casino, a restaurant, a mini golf course, a bingo hall, but this man chose to go in the swimming pool. He'd never been in a swimming pool before, but he saw the big diving board and thought he'd give it a go. Turns out the guy's a natural. He's so good that the captain was beyond impressed and wanted to showcase him to the guests. The captain let him stay there for a few months to practice and to entertain everyone. However, that wasn't enough for the captain. No. He wanted it to be bigger and better every time. One day, the captain decided to make the diving board much higher, which didn't seem to bother Harry much. The big day comes around and this thing is tall. I mean, real tall. Harry was a little bit intimidated, but he decided to go along with it anyway because he finally had somewhere to stay. He began to climb what he described as a never-ending ladder to heaven. Halfway up, he noticed that he could no longer see the swimming pool and that the clouds and seagulls appeared to be closer to him. He finally reached the top and took the dive knowing full well that he could completely miss and die. He dived perfectly. No splash at all. However, because of the velocity at which he was going, he went straight through the floor of the pool, piercing through several floors. Past the casino, past the tennis court, past the golf course, past his bedroll, until he went straight through the hull of the ship itself. Everyone thought he'd died, but after 5 minutes he resurfaced, much to everyone's disbelief. The captain couldn't believe it and wanted to know how Harry had done it, to which Harry responded, "Well, Captain, I've been through many a hard ship in my time." Not sure if it counts, but my dad was an accidental stowaway once. Back in the 80s, he was a representative for a major company in transport. One day, my dad and his co-worker were told to go to Ostend in Belgium and assess a situation on the ferry to Dover. I don't quite remember what it was about, but it had something to do with a truck on board. At the ship, they were met by a customs officer who accompanied them down below. The job apparently took a little longer than expected. Suddenly, both my father and coworker noticed that the ship seemed to be rocking a bit, as if it was at sea. The officer took them upstairs, and lo and behold, they were on their way to merry old England. The captain apparently had forgotten he still had people on board and had left the harbour. Once in England, my dad, his coworker, and the officer were briefly detained and then immediately put on transport back. Unfortunately, the first boat back didn't go to Ostend but to Calais, in France. So when they arrived, they had to call their boss and explain it to him. The boss had no choice but to come and pick them up himself and drive them to Ostend where their cars were.
How did your crazy ex become your crazy ex? After I broke up with her, she used makeup to make fake bruising on her arms, neck, and face. She then proceeded to send pictures of all of this to our mutual friends as a warning about me. I suspected that she was crazy long before I knew her, but I realized that she was a freaking psychopath when she asked me to euthanize my dog because he was taking up too much of our time. Holy crap, that's a nightmare! Yeah, I had to pull to the side of the road to finish that conversation because I started shaking uncontrollably after those words sank in. Dude, that is what we call a stage 5 clinger. Put an ad in the paper, became a lady of the night, brought clients to our family home, we had kids. If finding out your partner was cheating was an Olympic sport, this guy might be taking home the gold. I can't decide if this is hilarious or horrifying. Sims characters should never date their neighbors. Ever had a girlfriend threaten to harm herself because your Sims character is dating the computer-generated neighbor? I did. She woke me up because I had the night sweats and she was convinced I had AIDS. For some reason, I decided to appease her and I got a full STD screening test, including an expensive AIDS test. A few weeks later, I drove to her house and gave her my signed note, which I specifically had to request from my doctor stating my clean bill of health. She accused me of foraging the entire thing and in the following argument pulled out her plates out of her cupboard and started frisbeeing them at me. I left immediately. About 6 months later, I had just started dating my now fiance. She contacted me to tell me that she believed me and wanted to know if she and her 2 dogs could move in with me. I never responded. Dude, just waking up and demanding you get an AIDS test should have been the "I'm getting the freak out of here" moment. I knew that, I know that, I was young and she seemed cool prior to that. She also got extremely religious during the course of all of that, and quit her well-paying job without notice. Honestly, I think her mental health was on a serious decline. I can speak as someone who has dated a fair share of toxic women. When you are dumb, young, and full of, well, you often don't think clearly and red flags turn gray. He painted my name all over his bedroom, bathroom, and lounge room, proposed and then photoshopped us into wedding pictures, sent invites to all of his family, mine, and my friends, got an ultrasound photo online and tried to announce to Facebook that we were expecting a baby, shaved our initials into his cat and left hundreds of love letters taped to my car. So that was crazy. We went on half a double date with friends. I was just being a good sport. Noped out when he proposed when the food came out. The rest came over the next week. To clarify, in case that was confusing, this was all after our one and only date. This wasn't a "we dated for months and then his crazy came out." This was "we met an hour ago, why are you proposing to me?" She tried to draw my blood out while I was sleeping to put it in a vial she wore around her neck. Dude, I heard about people that do this and I just have to ask why. Like, what is the purpose? Would start arguments out of thin air because I'm drama and this is who I am. Then one day I went drinking in her hometown, she ran into her ex and a day later she said sorry, but I'm going to start dating him again. 2 days after that, she was begging to get back together. Nope. Messaged me occasionally for a few years to go out for a drink, but eventually she stopped when she got knocked up. Good luck to the guy who knocked her up. In addition to being an absolute gem of a personality, she had awful genetics and family. Getting that quote at the start just made me think of Breaking Bad. I'm drama, and I'm the one who starts it. He tried to strangle me with an HDMI cord because I didn't straighten my hair that day. He had been crazy for a while, but this was the very moment when I realized it. He walked miles in the snow to get to my house, tapped on my bedroom window for an hour until I acknowledged him. I turned him away. In the morning, I heard him rustling in my closet upon waking up. The little freak snuck into my house somehow and was hiding in my closet. I threatened to call the cops, so he left. Weeks later, he emailed me pictures of me sleeping from that night. I still have nightmares about finding him in my closet. This is by far one of the worst stories I've ever read here. I truly hope you are okay and have some form of legal separation from this psycho. He called me endlessly for 2 years. He's disappeared now, but it took a while. Are we gonna question what she means by disappeared? Like, did he just go away or did she make him go away? Was supposed to be medicated and never told me. Didn't matter since she stopped taking her meds before we dated. She tried to make up for it by taking many different recreational substances that she failed to mention as well. Found her substance kit and I noped out. Her mother said, and I quote, "I'm surprised you made it as long as you did." I dated a girl that was bipolar and I can confirm that things can drastically change if they suddenly stop taking their meds. Killed the dog that my dead spouse gave me. What a jerk. Please tell me you went on an epic killing rampage like John Wick. My husband's ex, his girlfriend from high school, was crazy because she set up an appointment for a portrait session to have pictures done for our 3 children for her house. No, we didn't let that fruitcake take our children. They broke up their senior year of high school. And this was when we were in our 30s. We were shocked by the contact from her, never mind the appointment. We also found out she had her phone number listed, this was the time of phone books, as Mrs. Our Surname this whole time, which was never her real name. She was stuck in her high school fantasy, which was frightening. This is the kind of story that has me Googling my ex's first names in combination with my last name, just in case. I could see one in particular pulling crap like this. This is definitely the start of a horror or suspense movie. Beat the crap out of me, then out of his next GF and their kids. He lied about his police record and previous conviction from beating me. He is charming and manipulative, so I get why she believed him. He got out of prison recently for what he did, and I'm just glad I'm across the country now. He started messaging all the new guys he thought I would maybe go out with, asking them not to invite me out because he felt like he still had a chance with me. This happened not once or twice. This happened with around 10 guys. He didn't even know them in person. I didn't even know them. I told her after 3 years of dating that I was actually a war refugee from Chechnya. She just knew that I was from Russia, nothing more. And that I had seen a lot of horrible things during my childhood. I saw people get executed, bombs exploding, people dying slowly of gangrene, dodging snipers, etc. Never really told anybody this in my life since I came to America. I told her because I was pretty sure I wanted to spend my future with her. I told her it was a massive deal that I told her this in the first place, because I've never told anybody. She left me right afterwards because she assumed I was crazy or mentally damaged from all the crap that I went through. She said that she didn't want to date some scary war refugee. The worst part was her parents, who I mostly communicated through because she refused to talk to me. They believed it too. They said horrible things about me, saying I was a criminal, a junkie, that I would end up beating her up, and that I'm just another street Arab. I am Azeri, not Arab. They basically put their foot down and said I could never date someone like their daughter. It was one of the worst weeks of my life. Really made me lose faith in long-term relationships. For all those curious, it wasn't an immediate thing. She always found me sketchy in a way because I was from the bad part of Brooklyn, and she knew I had a history with some hard substances in my teen years, even after coming to America. She was scared of all that stuff. She wouldn't go to certain bars or clubs that had a certain type of person. She preferred yuppie bars. She came from a white upper-class suburbs, so right there it was a major divide in how we grew up. Apparently that divide made her really uncomfortable. Like she couldn't relate to me, and finding out that I was a war refugee was the last straw for her. She tried to drown herself in a river in the middle of December because she thought I wanted to sleep with someone else. I had to wait out and get her. This was after she spiked my phone on the ground when I received a text message from a friend saying my then girlfriend had left her purse at the bar. On a separate occasion, she grabbed her car keys from me after getting wasted, and when I tried to stop her from driving, she almost ran me over. Yeah, she was nuts. Sounds like this girl I dated once when I was younger. Way before Uber and Lyft was a thing. She had been drinking and I told her that I would drive her home. She was extremely adamant that she would be fine to drive. Well, I told her that I was going to at least follow her home to make sure, and she just said fine. Well, the moment she got into her car, it became a Fast and the Furious movie. She was driving like she just robbed a bank and I was the cops. She tried to lose me on the highway and I ended up catching up to her at some gas station, and she freaked out and sped off again. I stopped following her after she called me and told me that if her dad finds out she's dating someone, he would send someone to kill me. I wasn't taking any chances, so I backed off. As you might assume, she turned out to be extremely toxic. Murdered my pet cat and left her corpse in my sock drawer. Was pregnant with another guy's baby. I found out when she lost it during a substance overdose. That was when I learned that she was pregnant and also did substances. Genetics. Both of her parents were bat crap crazy, so I shouldn't be surprised when she started stalking me after she cheated on me and I dumped her. She threatened a few of my, and by extension our, female friends with physical violence just for being around me, and tried to get me fired from my job. She called my manager and told him that I was on substances. Nothing further from the truth, and had two of her other friends come into my store and be extremely angry customers saying I felt them up or something. Fortunately, my boss knew about everything that was going on and didn't buy any of it. I noticed my undergarments were going missing. I mentioned it while doing the laundry. He accused me of cheating, saying that I left my things at some other dude's house, and that totally meant that I was cheating, and he began hurting me for the missing things. I was pregnant with his child at the time. I kicked him out. I was scared crapless on how I was going to support myself while I was about to give birth and miss 6 weeks of work. I began packing his things to keep my frightened mind busy. Found a big box hidden in the basement full of my undergarments, huge inflatable toys for where the sun don't shine, and trans adult content. My thigh highs were tied in knots with junk hair sticking out of them. I put in a video labeled with my name. It's him dressed in my clothes, doing stuff to himself while pretending to be me. Turns out he was a secret crossdresser with a violent history and multiple substance charges. Lied about everything, from his education to his orientation. I don't trust human beings anymore. Oh, I had one mega crazy ex. This girl was 5 kinds of freaked in the head and needed to be locked up. First, she had a kid. I didn't doubt that. I saw her stretch marks. Not a big deal. She claimed the kid had been kidnapped by a baby daddy and disappeared. Okay, strange things have happened. Things started not adding up soon. She was a pathological liar. Started with, I make $60 an hour in the military, which I knew was BS for her rank, since my mom was a higher rank than she was and made far less than that. She stole my car one night, and by the time the cops got there, she had already got back and claimed innocence, and the cops threatened to arrest me for making a false report. She then tried playing the ultimate psycho card. She said she got a call saying that the kid and her dad had been found in a wreck in Canada, and that the kid was dead. At first, I wasn't sure to call BS on that or not. 2 days later, she downed a bottle of sleeping pills with a full bottle of vodka. While she was in the hospital, I did some digging and found out that she and her husband got a divorce. He was awarded full custody due to her being a complete nutbag. I noped the freak out of there as fast as I could. Crazy story, but I do want to point out that you can 100% get stretch marks without having a kid. I'm a dude and I have some. Sometimes you just grow too fast for your body to keep up. When he got himself locked in 4-point restraints in the ER because he was convinced he had AIDS and started trying to infect the staff. Or when he proudly told me that he was the son of Jesus Christ. Or when he tried to kick in my door at 3 a.m. as a grand romantic gesture. Or also when he thought his bald spot would grow hair again if he was just a better person. That Jesus Christ comment reminds me of that kid on TikTok that believes he's the reincarnation of Hitler, because he has a birthmark where Hitler apparently got shot. Cat disappeared. Strange, was a friendly cat. Upstairs neighbor with big dogs came down screaming that my ex somehow convinced both dogs to jump out of the window to their deaths. She attacked me with scissors and a knife on different days. Serviced some guy in his car outside of our apartment. Finally, turned on her hairdryer and threw it into the shower with me. It takes a lot to piss me off apparently. Man, I wasn't expecting this post to get as much attention as it did, so let me elaborate a little bit. 2 disclaimers, I was young and stupid, and she was sexy as freak. This doesn't excuse my not bugging out much sooner, but it's just to give you some insight in my frame of mind. What I mentioned was pretty much in chronological order. Regarding the cat, not really that unusual. He was an indoor-outdoor cat, so any number of things could have happened to him. A neighbor may have thought that he was a stray and taken him in. He may have been hit by a car while he was out on a prowl. I have no idea. It's more of a, in retrospect, I wouldn't be surprised at all if that crazy bee killed him type of thing. The dogs, now that's much stranger. My ex hated those dogs. They were big and noisy, and ran around the upstairs apartment playing all day long. As such, she started a bit of a war with the upstairs neighbor, who was herself pretty nuts. I stayed the hell out of it. My ex had said several times that she was going to kill those freaking dogs, but I passed it off as just being annoyed with the constant noise. Hell, I didn't like it either. But otherwise, the apartment was great, so we weren't really too excited to find a new place. The incident, whatever it was, happened while I was at work. I came home to the crazy neighbor screaming at my ex about how my ex somehow coaxed her dogs into jumping from the window. Now, my ex was pretty petite, and these were big dogs, so there was no way she could have broken into the neighbor's apartment and physically thrown these dogs out the window. I've owned a few dogs in my life, and no matter how stupid they are, they were never so dumb as to fling themselves out of a window. Now, I have no idea what the hell actually happened, and to this day, all of this was probably 20 years ago, I still can't explain it at all. But at this point, I did start looking at my ex from the corner of my eye, just wondering. On to attacking me with scissors and later with a knife. Well, these incidents proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that she was dangerous, but both happened in the heat of a moment, during arguments. As I mentioned earlier, she was quite petite, and I was much faster than her, so I had little trouble disarming her without being really in harm's way. I mean, it wasn't like she was going to try and kill me in my sleep in cold blood, right? Yeah. I forgot to mention there was another attack. She tried to mace me in our apartment. Inside, with the windows closed. I just backed up and raised one eyebrow. Like, what the hell are you even doing? The mace just settled in a big cloud in the middle of the room, missing me entirely. This really made her mad, so she charged at me for another go with her mace can, straight into the cloud that she created. She dropped like a rock, and I just rolled my eyes. Okay, come on, let's get you to the bathroom and wash this out. The makeup fun time after was great though. But at this point, the relationship was pretty much over. It was just a matter of actually, officially ending it, which neither of us really seemed to want to do. All of these things, of course, happened over a few years. And of course, in the times between these instances, it was actually all normal boyfriend-girlfriend type stuff. Shopping, vacations, laughter, dinners, and talking about the future. Of course, there was arguments and fights, some her fault, some mine, but most of the time we were both to blame. It wasn't like it was 2 or 3 years of nothing but crazy 100% of the time. Relationships aren't that simple. Anyways, near the end, we both had sort of stopped caring. That's when I caught her hooking up with some guy outside of our apartment. That was the, well, this is 100% done moment. It was failing before, but I had hopes that we could still work through it or something. Like I said, I was young and stupid, and she was hot. But nah, this was done. So I set my mind and attention to finding a new place. I didn't even want to bother fighting over the apartment. It wasn't that nice. I just wanted out. Oddly, we were getting along fine now. We both had accepted it, or so I thought. One day I come home before her and I hop in the shower. The past several days had actually been great. Laughs, hooking up, cooking, like a normal couple. She comes home while I'm still in the shower, walks into the bathroom, turns on her hairdryer, and without a word and without emotion, she just throws it into the shower with me and just dead-eye stared. I pulled a freaking Matrix slow motion action jump, arms out, water droplets slowly falling in some sort of hyper reality, as if, well, someone had just thrown a hairdryer in your shower. Probably yelled, "What the freak?" Then I got dressed and walked the hell out. Came to get my things later with an army of friends. This story was wild. Oh, and by the way, as a warning sign for all the men out there, if your girl ever tries to stab you, get the hell out. I had a friend that almost died when his girl stabbed him while he slept. No girl is hot enough to die for. He cheated and I was stupid and forgave him. 2 months later, I was served with an eviction notice because he lied to my face about having paid rent. I told him that I would give him a chance to work on himself, but I needed space and I would find somewhere apart from him 2 months later when the lease was up. He threatened to end himself 3 times, called me wasted multiple times, switched between "you're the best ever and I love you and I can't live without you" and "you're a lady of the night and you're the worst person ever, die alone." From voicemail to voicemail. By then, I had told him that we were definitely over, but the final nail in the coffin for him was when he drove to my new house wasted to call me names and tried to pull me out of my house. When I told him to leave or I was calling the police, and I just went into my house. He was psychotic and emotionally crazy, and will always be psychotic and emotionally crazy. The crazy B literally made me choose between her and my mother and sister. She couldn't handle other women in my life. It went beyond not liking me being around them. She would go to crazy far lengths to get me away from any female in the vicinity. She never did that until a month or two before we broke up. Glad I did. He literally stopped talking to me after I told him I was SA'd. No breakup, just silence. He never spoke to me again. Art teachers of Reddit, what's the most disturbing artwork a student has ever submitted? My literary arts teacher told us a story about the only kid that's ever been kicked out of the program. He only wrote stories about women being killed and assaulted by snakes. No matter what the writing prompt was, he turned it into snake essay. He then read them out loud to class, proudly. He didn't last too long. Back in the 90s, I volunteered at an art studio that provided free classes for low-income inner-city at-risk youth. Wonderful nonprofit run by a couple of cool old hippie ladies who did an amazing job helping the kids feel free to express themselves artistically, no matter what they wanted to create. For example, one teenage smart butt made an elaborate paper mache of Bob Marley smoking a huge herb stick, and they hung it up proudly in a place of honor. No judgment or preachiness at this art class. So one year, they decided to have the younger kids do a Day of the Dead themed picture, with a short paragraph to commemorate a loved one. The teachers were expecting pictures of grandmas and maybe pets, and there were some of those. There were also several scenes of murder, including childishly drawn guns, knives, and oh, so much red, followed by short descriptions like, "My brother was shot, he's dead now, it was loud and scary, I miss him." These were like 7 to 9-year-olds. Those pictures were displayed just as proudly as the grandma pictures. That sounds like a wonderful program. It really was. They did so much good. And now I'm going to get up on my soapbox about public funding for art for children. Kids growing up in bad situations need role models, job training, education. They also need, like food and oxygen, a place to express themselves, including the anger and pain that they carry that no one wants to listen to because it makes us all feel uncomfortable. In those art classes, I saw angry 9-year-olds who acted like antisocial, jaded 15-year-olds. They were actually relaxed for a change and enjoyed themselves creating something beautiful or ugly or weird, but something they had control over. The look of defiance, then gratitude when a kid would make a picture of a dinosaur stomping on a car wreck and the art teacher would say, "Wow, great use of color and detail," instead of more disapproval, was priceless. The heart and soul of our world is so much more than the bottom dollar line, y'all. I have to say, I absolutely love that these programs let the kids create whatever was on their mind. My earliest memory of writing was when I was in the 4th grade. My teacher had us do a group project where we had to make up a story involving everyone in the group. Well, one big thing that was happening around this time was the series Resident Evil was getting really popular, and I decided to write a story where we were all trapped in the zombie apocalypse like Resident Evil. This story literally had kids getting killed in it because, well, that's what happens in the game. I remember after presenting it to class, everyone wanted to be in the next story because they thought it was so cool. Looking back, I'm glad my art teacher didn't force me to write something different because it might have killed my spirit and robbed me of that moment of people praising my work. High school 1977. While everyone else is drawing Pink Floyd rainbows and peace signs all over everything, the biggest burnout in class makes this wide metal bracelet with intricate triangle designs cut out of it. He turns it in and gets a great grade for the first project he ever bothered finishing, and some well-deserved praise for his effort. Teacher hands the work back, and the first thing he does is grab a pair of pliers and bends all the triangles outward, making a thick metal spiked bracelet. I found that devilishly, disturbingly clever. Told the kids to draw something that would make them happy. One kid scribbled black all over the page and said nothing makes him happy. That student was referred to the school counselor. I was in primary school. The teacher told us to get out our jotters and come up with some ideas for a poem that focused on one particular emotion. I scribbled out and tore up 3 pages. It took hours for me to cheer up. However, there was a good side. There were a pair of jerks in my class who couldn't do anything to save their lives. They always came up to the teacher and asked for help with the age-old, "I can't do it." This time, my teacher pointed at me with my head buried in my arms on my desk and said, "That's what 'I can't do it' looks like. Just because you're in tears doesn't mean you can't be smug." God damn, that art teacher kicked that kid while they were down? That's rough. When I was a camp counselor, I let one of my campers draw while he was waiting for his parents to pick him up. He left his drawing behind and my supervisor picked it up, went over to me and was like, "What the freak is this?" He drew a bunch of dead bodies at the bottom of a staircase, covered in blood, body parts left behind on the stairs, lots of red crayon was used. I didn't find out till later that one of his favorite things to do was play a computer game called Stairfall with his older brother. You know, the flash game where you throw stick figures down a set of stairs to see how badly they can get hurt. I never played that game, but I want to play it now. When I was in kinder, I drew a male ghost going to the bathroom. I had older brothers, so it was very detailed. And I even put a water line in the testes, because that's where I thought they stored the urine. The teachers and principal called in my parents for a serious conference, and asked my dad what he was going to do about the picture. After my dad finished laughing, he told them that he was going to make copies and send it to all of his friends and relatives for Halloween. And he did. And I still have a few extra copies. Oh, and I found out that the balls do not, in fact, store urine. Not me, but I played a huge part. Brother's art class in the 2nd grade was doing those full body tracings on big sheets of butcher paper. They were supposed to trace each other and then draw themselves. My brother evidently refused to draw a face for himself. Would not budge on that. Drew everything else, but no face. Wouldn't say why, and because he was super shy and quiet, clammed up more when the teacher started grilling him about it. The art teacher calls the principal because this is concerning. Principal calls school counselor. Counselor meets with my brother, who still won't talk about why he won't draw his face, asking him questions like, "Do you not like yourself? Do you feel bad about yourself?" etc. At this point, he's really clammed up and is now refusing to talk because he's really shy to begin with, and all this questioning is happening. School calls my parents. They have a meeting about the fact that they think my brother is depressed or has some kind of mental issue. Parents freak out, of course, and my brother still won't talk. My parents and counselors start asking if he feels neglected or unloved or some crap. Mom's crying, dad is frustrated, and my brother thinks he's in trouble for something, and I guess in an effort to stop them all acting crazy, he says he doesn't draw his face because he hates someone in the family. Cue full family counseling for like a month. My mom is a wreck, thinks my brother feels like he's neglected, and doesn't love him. So she's constantly like, "You know I love you very much, right?" Counseling isn't going well because my brother is just quiet and confused. Me, 2 years older than him, is just mad that we always have to be at this office. Finally, during one session, my brother finally cracks. The doctor asks, "Who is the person in your family that you hate?" My brother says, Puss, our cat. She bites me." My dad and mom are stunned. The doctor is surprised, but pushes his advances now that my brother is finally talking. "Why didn't you want to draw your face? Do you feel bad about yourself?" My brother says, "I just wanted OP to do it. She's a better drawer than me." No psychosis, no early childhood trauma, no mental disorder, just an overly concerned art teacher and a little kid who thought it would be best if his older sister drew his face because she's a better drawer than me. It makes me really uncomfortable when teachers push children who are shy like that. I remember seeing stuff like that in art class where students didn't want to talk and teachers would just make huge deals about it, making the situation even worse for kids. There's a way to bring them out, but making a huge scene in front of the class is the worst thing you could do. Bro, all I have to say is after all of that drama, that is an instant chokeslam and powerbomb onto a mattress when we get home, followed by a Shawn Michaels elbow drop. Not a teacher, but in 2nd grade I was infatuated with the battleship Bismarck. I also loved the flag on it, with the red background and white circle with that cool box thingy. We had to build a design to look like a quilt using construction paper. I did mine using the Nazi flag. It looked 100% like it. My teacher didn't say a word, but it was shown to my parents and they burned it. It took me 5 years until I figured out why they did that. Not an art teacher, but in my AP art class in 12th grade, a fellow student in class decided to make an art portfolio with the human fetus as its theme. One piece in particular was a hyper-realistic ink drawing of a tossed salad with little fetuses in lieu of shrimp. If my memory serves me right, they also did a piece that was a martini with the fetus in lieu of the olive on the toothpick. I had a second grader draw a picture of me and him together, and my hand was behind him. He wrote, "Coach Cubert likes to touch me." I don't believe I ever touched him, not really the type of person. However, it was pretty embarrassing. Not a teacher, but my daughter came home from kindergarten with this. When I asked what it was, she said, "Cookie Monster with his head blown up, and then he peed his pants because his head's blowing up." It's still hanging in her room because she's so proud of it. I didn't realize it at the time, but apparently we have a few copies of this theme. Either my kid is really a psycho, or she remembered that we thought the original was funny and did it again. Her early work was a little too abstract for my taste, but when Cookie Monster with his head blown up and then he peed his pants because his head was blowing up came out in '83, I think she really came into her own, commercially and artistically. The whole piece has a clear, crisp look, and a new sheen of consumer and professionalism that really gives the composition a big boost. She's been compared to early Basquiat, but I think the OP's daughter has a far more bitter, cynical sense of humor. You remember that Superbad movie scene with the beepies? My friend did that about 15 years before that movie came out, and someone turned it into the teacher. He got suspended for a few days, and his parents had to come in and review the notebook with the principal. I mean, it was filled front to back with peepees. I had this kid, I'll call him Joe. He had special needs and loved movies. He hated everyone but me. I was his first male teacher ever. He would often draw me pictures of Godzilla and King Kong. It was awesome. When he went to the next grade, he drew a picture of his new teacher being eaten by sharks. She freaked out, called a whole bunch of meetings, and went nuts. She was saying that she was scared that he wants her dead and she fears for her life. I was asked to have a talk with the kid. I asked him what the picture was, and he said that it was the lady from Jaws 4 being eaten by Jaws. We then proceeded to talk about how Jaws 1 and 2 are awesome. I will always sing the praises of a good teacher. My first and second grade teachers absolutely sucked. They were old ladies and they thought I was a troublemaker and often sent me to the office because I wasn't doing my work. It wasn't until the third grade and I had this amazing black teacher who noticed I was struggling and told my parents that I might have dyslexia. Sure enough, I did, and I started getting special help. Even though I hated it at the time, I really appreciate that my third grade teacher didn't just pass me off as the bad kid and really look deeper into what was wrong with me. A friend of mine had to have a meeting with his parents and teachers about his drawing in primary school. They were completely harmless drawings of zoos, houses, trees, etc. But when you viewed them upside down, they showed disturbing images. Obviously, he had no idea what they were going on about and said it wasn't intentional. He's now working in a good job and is completely normal. This kid drew a giant turd on the chalkboard. There was pieces of corn in it too. He said he didn't like Chipotle anymore. A yellow smiley with a sad mouth, with big black words written on it. "I want to eat a lot of medicine to end myself. My parents hate me." This kid was 10 years old. Not an art teacher, but there was this kid in my art class who would always draw super dark things. Not so much scary, but more depressing. I figured he might have a crappy home life, and I noticed he didn't really have friends. So I thought I could talk to him and just be friendly. He seemed really nice, just a little weird. Flash forward about 3 months, and wow, I'm glad I was nice to that guy. He got called down to the principal's office during class, and no one knew why. We finally found out that he had written a hit list and had been suspended for a month. Seems a little lax, but whatever. He comes back to class and no one wants to go near him. At the end of class, however, he comes right up to me and says, "Don't worry, you weren't on the list." You had me convinced that you were talking about me right up until had written a hit list. I was the proud artist behind some strange works in community college. A girl in class thought I went through a rough breakup or something and just made nice small talk with me throughout the day. We talked a lot about the music we liked and local restaurants we recommended. I really enjoyed class because I got to spend time with her. It was nice. Well, someone else supposedly interpreted my art differently and told campus police that I was going to shoot up the college Columbine style. Got pulled from the class to talk to police and a social worker. It didn't go well because I got a year's probation for terroristic threats. I still went to class and all, but it was never the same. I always thought that that girl I talked to could have just been playing me. I find it crazy that people can just be punished from made up crap. Like, this isn't those people that cry about cancel culture ruining people's lives. This is legit someone made up something and it had an effect on another person's life. I truly think we need harsher punishments for people who make false claims. I had a male college drawing one student who liked to draw pictures of beautiful women screaming. I can see how this could easily be goth or trying too hard to be edgy. It wasn't any of those things. He just really liked pictures of women in distress and seemed obsessed by the idea of it. I jokingly told him to use his powers for good and not for evil, and that it's better to get your emotions out in drawing than in the real world. Not an art teacher, but I'm a volunteer at a center that does art therapy. One of the happiest little clients we ever had handed me a drawing of their deceased mother with their face twisted into a horrified scream. Eyes blackened and brown goop was pouring from the mouth and eyes. Sometimes I stay up at night thinking about it. Oh, and I thought I should verify something. This person's age was mid-20s to 30s. I volunteer at a center for adults with disabilities. I don't know the full details of this client other than they function at a lower mental capacity. My little brother got in trouble for drawing a picture of a polar bear eating a seal. Lots of red crayon was used. He was like 9. I didn't get why it was such a big deal. It's not like it doesn't happen. When I was a kid, I drew a dinosaur eating another one, with an open rib cage and everything. My teacher wanted to send me to a therapist. I just wanted to draw realistic looking scenes. I got in trouble with the teacher who couldn't stand me. We were using the computers and this age-old image just happened to be on some website I was on as an ad for something. One of those crappy ads that is on the side of the screen when you're scrolling down. She called a meeting with the principal and called my mom in. Thankfully, my mom called her out on her BS and pretty much told her to quit being a petty idiot and wasting everyone's time. I almost cried, I was so happy. When I was in high school, a really weird guy would ignore the instructions for any assignment and just draw pictures of people being murdered, cut up, buried alive, all kinds of crazy crap. The teachers never did anything. One day after school, he pulled a knife and stabbed my friend in the hand for being a Jew. Suspended for 2 weeks. He told someone that he was going to shoot up the school like Columbine. Luckily, the person he told went to the police. When they came to the kid's house, they found a rifle and a drawing of the school. He was planning on setting fire in the chemistry lab, and then when people came out of the other side of the building, he was going to start shooting from the bleachers in the football field with a rifle. I don't know what happened after he got arrested, but hopefully he's never freaking getting out of prison. That guy was seriously dangerous. Also, our teachers and school administration were clearly freaking brain dead. How did he not get thrown in jail or juvie for stabbing somebody? Plus, it was a hate crime. Most likely, the school didn't want police involved as it would look bad on them. And the parents pulled some strings not to get him expelled, so he was just suspended. It happens more than it should. I do want to add that this is a horrible and mostly illegal behavior from the school, and it definitely does not happen everywhere, and I want to believe that most schools are against any kind of behavior like that in their administration. But this happens in good schools, where the school's reputation, which helps them attract donors, is so important to them, that even the smallest violent case being reported makes the administration go all defense mode, and try to brush it under the rug in fear of any kind of violence being connected to their name. The fear of their job and money gets the better of them. Obligatory not the art teacher, but in high school we had a kid whose art portfolio was displayed at the school's art show. Numerous drawings, sketches, paintings, etc. of tadpoles. From a single one to dozens to hundreds. A full 2-year art class is dedicated to tadpoles. Until he informed everyone he was drawing sperm. Not the teacher, I was the kid. Little background, grew up in a small beach town and was somewhat known for my artwork and being pretty good artist for a little kid. In the 8th grade, we had to design a deck of playing cards. I was 13 and was going through a really hard time and made a series of super dark cards, like the Fallen King and the Dead Joker, Queen of Human Hearts, Hanged King, etc. I really enjoyed working on them and loved how they turned out. Very dark, but also colorful, like Dolly meets Tim Burton. Anyways, I went to a small private school and our cards were going to be displayed for the art show. Mine weren't allowed in the show and weren't allowed to be displayed for them being too dark, and my teacher said I needed therapy. Which, surprise, I was already in and was told to express my negative feelings through my art, which I did and then got in trouble for and denied a place in the art show. I still have my cards, I still think they are pretty dope. Still bitter about it not being in the art show though. I accidentally made a realistic hoo-ha in my pottery class. This happened to me during one of my ceramic classes in college. The professor was teaching us how to use pottery wheels to make bowls. If you can imagine the act of making a bowl out of clay, the clay is pulled up taller and wider as the pottery wheel spins. I'm doing my thing, making a real nice bowl. Then at a certain point, it all collapsed inwards from two opposite sides. The clay folded in on itself as it fell, and the weight caused the original bowl shape to elongate. I was left with what looked like a perfectly detailed clay hoo-ha. So naturally, I left it as it was and fired it, and glazed it. Now years later, I sneak it into friends' houses and put it on their bookshelves. When they find it, they shake their heads, laugh, and do the same thing to someone else in the friend cycle. I call it the brotherhood of the traveling hoo-ha. Men have read it who proposed and she said no. What happened afterwards with your life? My mother told my father no 3 times. On the 3rd time, he got wasted at the local bar and basically started pouring his heart out to anyone who would listen. Mind you, it's a very small village in the Italian Alps, and my father barely spoke Italian, and no one in the village spoke English, including my mother. Word got back to my mother about this sad American at the bar, so she went to find him and she told him that she'd marry him. My parents celebrated their 44th anniversary last month. Bro, it's women like this that give hope to the annoying, desperate male characters that want girlfriends in most anime. She was an art major and I had just joined the army. We had been lovers since high school. I asked and she said no. She wanted to get her master's. We were friends for a while, but we don't talk anymore. She works as a bartender now, I think. I ended up getting married to my best friend. We've been married for more than a decade and we have a 5-year-old son. Oh, I have a story about this. My friend had been with his girlfriend for years, so he decided he wanted to propose. What he didn't know is that she was also thinking about proposing to him. He proposed first and she freaked out because she had already set up her proposal and bought a ring, so she said no. Over the next week, she freaked out more and more and refused to answer his calls or messages. My friend then decided to use the money he had saved up to buy a plane ticket to Europe. What was supposed to be a 3-month trip through Western Europe turned out to be a year-long trip around the world. One day he says that he's coming back and she decides to go and wait for him at the airport and propose there. It turns out that while being in Peru, he met a girl and they fell in love almost immediately, and he got married in Peru. Cue 5 years later, he and his Peruvian wife are still very happily married and recently had a baby, while his ex still hasn't quite forgiven herself for ruining her relationship with him. At first, I thought this was going to be the typical one proposed and the other takes out their ring and makes it a double proposal, but this definitely had a turn that I wasn't expecting. I mean, how dumb can you be to let someone you wanted to marry leave the country for 3 months and let it turn into a year? Pretty idiotic if you ask me. My mom actually said no to my dad's proposal when they were younger, not because they weren't in love, but because she wasn't sure if it was something she actually wanted to do, rather than something that society expected of her or whatever. They still stayed together and had kids, hence why you're reading this now. And when my dad was terminally ill a few years ago, my mom plucked up the courage and asked him. Just to get back at her after all of those years, he said no, before taking up her offer a few days later. He died a happy man. For a bit more of context on this, it was actually 2 declined proposals, not just 1, both pre-children too, so let's say I'm lucky. Also, when they did get married, it wasn't purely an action for the estate or whatever, they already had their wills sorted out. It was just one of those last great days as a family type things. In fact, my sister and I were the only 2 present at the registry office. And when I say office, they literally squeezed us into one of the registry offices as there was a big waiting list for weddings, and we didn't know how long he had. He died 3 months later, so we were all hugely grateful for them helping us out with this. As a woman who got engaged and the proposal was later revoked, it still stings a little 11 years later. When you are so sure you're with the love of your life, losing them can really pop a hole into your life plans. We met in her home country of Germany while I was traveling. I knew I was in love. We dated long distance for a while. Me flying to Europe, her flying to the US. I suggested marriage so we could be together. She said no a few times. I didn't press, but I was patient and not being pushy. I knew she was worth the wait. Then it hit her that's how we could be together. If we got married, we could live in a country together. That was a difficulty of being born on different patches of dirt. A few years later, I'm still married to my best friend and living with her in Germany. Not all no's stay no. Life goes on. We lived together for another 6 years until she changed her mind and told me that I should ask again. We were engaged for over a year and got married in 1991. We are still married and have 3 children, and we are both still very much in love. I find it crazy that relationships still continue after a proposal rejection. Because on one hand, it feels like the rejection is saying, I don't want to spend the rest of my life with you. But I guess on the other hand, the person might just be against the idea of marriage. Which is fair, because you don't want to marry someone who is against the idea of marriage. I mean, look at Will Smith and his entanglement. My dad proposed to a woman who said no. My dad was a violent alcoholic, and she said she couldn't be with him unless he got clean. Took him a little while, but he did just that. He wound up meeting my mom through a matchmaker, and they've been married for 25 years. If that woman never said no to him, he would have never gotten clean. It was the lowest point in his life, but it all brought him to my mom, who makes him happier than ever. She had cancer. I said we should get married because I had full medical coverage from my work. She said no. And over time, we grew apart. I haven't talked to her in 15 years. I don't know if she died. I knew a couple who did just that. He proposed in order to give her citizenship and health insurance, so she could remain here and get cancer treatment she desperately needed. They stayed married for about 15 years and he even adopted her son, but they never lived together or were romantically involved. Years later, they divorced when he met the woman of his dreams and wanted to get married. They were all very close friends, with no drama. She lived and is a university professor now. He's in another state with the woman of his dreams. Phoebe Buffay, is that you? So this actor, Patrick Moot, proposed to his girlfriend at a basketball game and gets turned down while on a giant jumbotron. Clip goes viral on YouTube, Facebook, etc. She tells him later that she turned him down because she thinks his pee-pee is too small. So he travels around the world documenting what other cultures think about pee-pee size, pee-pee enlargement, and made a movie about it called Unhung Hero. I've never watched it, but the title alone makes me laugh. I've never heard of this film before, but I do agree. I think it's a great title, and I'm interested in watching it now. This is the story of my parents. My dad asked my mom to marry him several times. She said no several times. One day, my dad asked my mom to marry him yet again, and she said yes. He freaked out and left her apartment and dumped her. 3 weeks later, he hated his life without her and begged her to take him back and marry him. They were married 9 months later for 16 years until my mom passed from cancer. They loved each other so much and they had such a deep appreciation for each other. That was 25 years ago. My dad has not remarried. No one will ever come close to my mama. Dated a woman for over 2 years and popped the question. First time she said, I don't know. A couple of months later I asked again. She said, maybe. I was pretty bent out of shape. But then I found out that she was sleeping with several of my friends, so I dodged a bullet there really. Damn dude, I'm sorry about your friends, genuine crap bags of people, to knowingly sleep with your girl. I hope you find better friends. Dude, that would literally break me. Like, cheating is crappy if it's a coworker or someone you don't trust. It's 1,000 times better than going to vent to your friend about your girl cheating and he's like, yeah, I'm the other guy. It happened to a friend of mine, and honestly, I think it did break him. His girlfriend slept with his oldest friend. This was a couple of years ago. I remained friends with the guy for a while afterwards, and his personality within the relationship just seemed to, for a lack of a better word, crumpled. She continued to sleep with other guys and manipulated him into blaming himself for the unfaithfulness. I think most people would agree that cheaters belong in the trash, set on fire, and then thrown off a cliff. FYI, that was just a figure of speech, don't take it literally. We received a letter from the immigration office saying that she was lacking some documents. At the moment, we were stressed, both of us with work and study, and none of us were sufficiently fluent enough in German to decipher this kind of language. We went to the university office for foreign students. The lady in charge translated the letter badly, telling us that even with presenting the documents, they would proceed with the deportation process. We panicked, looking for some more help. We ended up at City Hall. With the adrenaline rush, I proposed to her in quite a loud voice, "If we got married, could we stop the deportation?" is what I said to the poor guy in the information office. I can't remember if he gave us an answer. I want to marry her. Will you marry me? She started laughing. I started laughing. The guy in the office gave us the telephone to the pertinent department and asked us to call. We went out of the city hall and we couldn't stop laughing. She said to me, well, thank you, but let's wait a bit. After the weekend, we went to the immigration office and the people there explained which documents were missing and how to get them. She wasn't denied the visa and we kept living in the same way as we planned. It was intense and, in retrospect, pretty funny. My mom and dad were not married but wanted a kid and had me. My dad, being a Catholic and Hispanic, decided he wanted to be married to my mom and proposed. She said no because she hadn't been divorced from her first husband for very long and now had 3 kids and preferred to stay unmarried. He threatened to leave her and got on his motorcycle and started to drive away until my mom chased him down and gave in, leading to what my parents call the voodoo wedding the same day. I'm gonna need more details about this voodoo wedding if you have them. From my understanding, the way it went down was they immediately flipped through a phone book looking for someone who could marry them for free the same day. They eventually came across a small mom and pop store / restaurant in a bad part of town called The Cut that agreed to do it in a back room using their waitstaff as the witnesses. It was a quick 5-minute ceremony that ended with the officiant making them eat a meal with them. To their dismay, they were charged for all of it and had to run home and break open the quarter jar. Okay, look, I get men can be very dramatic at times and act this way when getting rejected, but my guys, we really need to sit back and reevaluate how we handle rejection. Getting someone to marry you out of pure pity is not the strat. I was a young Marine and I was only home during the weekends. I was dating this girl for about a year from my hometown. When I asked, she said yes. Her dad, who was former Navy, kept saying that we should wait. We put it off for a bit longer. Fast forward another year, she dumped me. Father informs me that she had been sleeping with a lot of guys, like more than 50 over the last 2 years that we dated, and was very happy I didn't marry her, and he apologized for her bad behavior. She then totally ghosted everyone in her family for about 6 months. Find out she moved 7 hours away and was living under a house, and I don't mean in a basement. Literally under a house with a new BF. She calls her mom to come get her. The mother and father asked me if I could go get her and bring her home. Good times, good times. That would have been a big hell nah from me, my guys. I asked her right out of high school and she said she wasn't ready. We stayed together, went to college at the same school, spent the first year in separate dorms, then moved in together, got married a few years later. Our 20th is coming up. In 2017, Google came up with this idea to allow you to make photo books out of your Google Photos account. My girlfriend and I had been dating for almost 2 years, and I knew that she was the one that I wanted to marry. So I created this wonderful photo book of all the selfies of us together, and ended it with a page made out of photos I generated that say, "Will you marry me?" I then proceeded to put all of these into an album and build the photo book. What didn't occur to me at the time was that the album I put these in was a shared album, and other people get notifications when you add new photos to it. And the other person that this album was shared with? My girlfriend. That evening, we had dinner and it all came out. She saw the photo and she wasn't ready. There were a few reasons why, and they were good reasons and smart reasons, mostly to do with timing, family, and finances. We weren't breaking up, we just weren't getting engaged at that time. A year later, we had successfully discussed the concept of getting married. We went ring shopping, she picked out her own ring, and by the time I actually did propose, we both knew what the answer would be. We celebrated our first wedding anniversary in April. It seems to have worked out so far, and the photo book is on my shelf to my left as we speak. I'm a firm believer that the only surprise in a proposal should be how you're proposing, not that you are. She or he should know that it's going to happen at some point, but not how. Marriage is a big deal and should be discussed extensively beforehand as it is a huge legal agreement. I'm glad it ended up working out for you. The photo book idea was really sweet. My mom told my dad no when he proposed to her, even though they were already living together. She thought he was impotent, and it wasn't until she got pregnant that she said yes. In retrospect, I wish my parents would have decided earlier in their relationship that they could barely stand each other. That's a big oof for the OP, but money and kids have to be the 2 biggest reasons people don't get together, right? I spoke to her about it beforehand, and she seemed really keen on the idea, so I decided to propose about a week after in front of all of her friends. She was so shocked she picked me up off my knee and shooed me away. Most of her friends were confused because everyone knew what was going to happen, and she said that she was excited for it. I didn't know what to do. It was all really embarrassing, and later on she explained that she didn't mean no, she just didn't know what to say and was scared. She said yes after apologizing profusely, and just this year we celebrated our 9th anniversary. Not my story, but someone I'm friends with. They both had crappy homes and became a couple at 14. Somewhere around 20, he proposed to her. She said that she wasn't ready to commit yet. After that, he proposed every year partially in hopes that she would be ready, but it was also kind of a ritual where he would just show her that he's still serious. She would say no every time. In their late 20s, he was done with his studies. She could see the finish line, so she told him that she's ready, meaning marriage and eventually children. That's when he got second thoughts about marrying the only woman he had ever had a relationship with, and he wasn't sure if he was making a mistake. They went on a break. She went to the US from Europe to do her PhD at MIT. They eventually drifted apart more. She moved on and found a new long-term relationship with a partner that's a lot better for her, while he quickly regretted ending the relationship and started hooking up with whoever he could find on Tinder without being able to form a meaningful relationship after. That's what a lot of people would call fumbling the bag. My mom rejected my dad the first 2 times. There was no real hard feelings between them. I guess my mother just wasn't ready for marriage yet. She ended up proposing to him. My grandmother and my mother sewed a suit for their dog to wear and attached a sign around his neck with a ring that read, "Will you marry me?" Then she sent the dog into the kitchen to beg for scraps while my father was preparing dinner. The next thing she heard was a very concerned voice shouting, "Honey, the dog is asking to marry me!" Cue absolute hysterics. My dad said yes to the proposal. My human dad and my human mom are still married 2 years later. We'd been dating for a year and a half, and I was due to move out on orders. Was in the army. She suggested we get married. I said, no way. I'm going off to school, army type, for 6 months and then a year on deployment to the Middle East. It just wouldn't work. She was calm and then said, "You think I'll be a burden to all of that, but I'll actually be a help." Well, just seconds earlier, all I could think of was what a pain in the butt it would be to get married and leave, and now, for whatever reason, it seemed perfectly reasonable that she was right. We got married a week later at the courthouse. I was 22. Last month, we had a really nice social distance dinner party for our 29th anniversary with our 2 amazing kids and a few friends. For non-military people listening to this, could you marry someone in the military? Personally, I don't think I could, but that's probably because I've come across too many people that have been in the military that are unfaithful. She said yes, as I had a special occasion planned, one of those observation wheels, and I proposed at the very top, and we were on our way to a family event, and I had the ring made and everything. Then a few days later, she said no. Everything fell apart. I was distraught. We continued dating for a while, but it was long distance, other side of the world. When I visited, it would be super awkward. Eventually, her dad kicked me out. I was flying standby and was stuck in an airport for 4 days. Took me years to recover. Now I am happily married and I'm glad it never worked out. I wasn't in a good place when I had met her and her family was super controlling. It would have never worked. The woman I married is super cool and is my best friend. Turned out better than I expected. We were dating for a little over a year, but I was so sure she was the one. I drove 2 hours to see her at college and went on a beautiful winter night walk and proposed. She looked me right in the eyes and said, "Oh, you thought this was serious? Well, I don't know how to say this other than that I've been seeing other people. Well, actually, I have been seeing other women." I was stunned. I got up, put the ring in my pocket, and walked to my car. Got in and drove away, never looking back and crying the whole time. Haven't seen or spoken with her in 7 years, even though she's tried countless times to reach out. Now it's a story I tell my friends who are nervous about asking their significant others to marry them, reminding them that even if they say no, it could be worse. Well, about 2 years later, I met my wife of 22 years. We are happily married. The one that said no got married for the first time last year and seems happy. My wife is way into me in ways that the former girlfriend was never, and I see that my life is far more happier with my wife than the one that said no. She's not a bad person. I was just young and in love with someone that wasn't in love with me. It worked out for the best. I'm glad she said no. Not sure if this counts, but I did propose. She said yes, but 1 month before the wedding, she took it back. This is what happened immediately with my life. I personally lost $3,000 worth of deposits. My parents and her parents lost about $4,000 each on deposits. Me and my parents are working class, so it took us years for us to financially recover from this. I spent about $2,200 on the ring I didn't want. That was my biggest regret, and I will say that to anyone who listens. The engagement ring chain I bought it from wouldn't take it back. I took it to pawn shops and they'd only offer a few hundred. This engagement ring store banked on customers who wanted the whole ring. Stone, band, setting. If you're going to buy a ring, just buy the stone. For the gold band setting, you can get that at a local jewelry store. Apparently my gem that I bought was crap. Most of the cost of the ring was BS. Most of my family was from out of state, and a lot of them were pissed because they had to cancel their flights. I had to go to the ER because I didn't leave my room. I couldn't take any calls because everyone was so pissed and I didn't want to hear it. I was depressed and just stayed in bed. One day, my roommates grabbed me and took me to the ER where the doctor treated me for severe dehydration and an infection. What happened when I got over it? I became stronger for it. I didn't propose to anyone until a decade later. Honestly, there wasn't anyone that I loved deeply enough to be committed in a relationship. But when I proposed, I was in my 30s. Our relationship was more mature than the first time I proposed. We've now been married for 13 years. She's my best friend. When I have good news, she's the first person I want to tell. And when I have bad news, she's the first person I want to tell. I also financially recovered as well. I learned my lesson about the engagement ring. Only paid $300 for it. She loved it and treasures it. After our 10-year milestone, we were doing so well, I took her to pick out a new wedding ring at any cost. She refused, and she still wears the cheap $300 ring and loves it. Redditors, what is your "did I freaking stutter" moment? Vehicle inspector here. Sir, your back taillight is broken. You need to get that fixed and come back. I'm friends with the owner here, and you're telling me that my car has problems? I already have, and if you aren't prepared in the future, don't waste my time. My friend has a shop and does vehicle inspections too. At least once a month he hears, "But some other shop gave me a sticker." And his response is always, "How nice for you. Take it to their shop then." When I finally kicked my ex out of my life, she tried to argue us back into being together. As I drove her to the airport, and even had the balls to critique my arguing techniques as inconducive to resolving a fight. I cut her off and said, "What part of this are you not getting? We're way past that. This is not a fight that I need to work through with you. I'm taking you to the airport and I never want to see or hear from you again." Dude, I feel your pain. Went through almost the exact same crap with my last ex. My ex openly admitted to getting me mad on purpose because she found enjoyment in it. Screw all crazy exes. Found out my supposed best friend, who I was letting live on my couch, was sleeping with my girlfriend who was also living with me. I work in IT, so I work crazy long hours, but we had a massive power outage one day and my boss said to go home for the day. So I left 5 hours early. Caught them both red-handed. Kicked them both out at once, which was ideal because I got 2 birds with 1 stone. They both apologized profusely and asked me, even though they made a mistake, why would I kick them out on the streets in an area where they can't afford to live? Silicon Valley. I laughed my butt off and said, "I guess that's something you two should have figured out during pillow talk, huh?" And I slammed the door as hard as I could right in their faces. Needless to say, it wrecked me for a while because I loved that girl. But looking back on it, I think it's the only moment in my life where I proudly have stood up for my morals and values and not taken any crap or continued letting people walk all over me. And that crap is priceless. God damn, dude. Props to you for being such a savage and an overall Chad. Hope everything worked out. My mom came to my new place, and out of reflex, she called me a lady of the night like she did when I was living with her as a teenager. I told her to get out. There was this amazing moment when she was completely disoriented by my reaction. It didn't compute, so I had to tell her again. "It's time for you to go, please leave." It was one of the most important moments in my life. I'm amazed you were nice enough to let her show up in the first place for treating you that badly. Good on you for immediately sending her out. Thanks, she was there because I want to stay on good terms with my dad. He is the reason I'm anywhere near her. Sending her out was very empowering and very sad. It was amazing to finally have the power to stand up to her, but really sad that this is what I have to put up with from my own mother. Ever since then, she has made an effort not to insult me in front of my face. So there's been some progress. Horrible situation. My mom was an alcoholic who was paying for all of her boyfriend's nursing home expenses and then paid all of his family's expenses like car payments, big purchases like appliances, or home remodel payments. My mom's addiction caused her health to plummet. She needs to be in nursing care. Her BF dies and his family never contacts her unless it's to complain about the money they need. I take over her finances and cut off all of those freaking sugar mama payments. If they had stayed in regular contact or regularly visited her, sure, I would have considered it. But no, they just wanted her to cover their payments. I cut off the entire family. My mother had a lot of money. One of the jerk's BF's sister calls to tell me that they're going to report me to Adult Protective Services. I say, go ahead. I have nothing to hide and you guys are the jerks. They were flabbergasted that I said, did I freaking stutter? They tried to report me, but all that happened was Adult Protective Services reached out to see if I needed any help transitioning my mom to the nursing care. They stopped talking to my mom after that. She died never hearing from them again. I was the one holding her hand during the last few days of her life. They didn't come to her funeral or to the memorial her students held for her after that. If I'm being honest, I think this OP was pretty soft on these people. Maybe this was their first time having to talk to horrible people, because I would have tombstoned these people to hell. When I quit my last job due to a promotion, I let my current boss know that I accepted the promotion and gave him 3 weeks notice, and that my last job was going to be March 31st. He proceeded to tell me that he would discuss a time when he would allow me to leave, and I wasn't allowed to leave until he said so. I very firmly repeated myself that March 31st would be my last day, and that was non-negotiable. He was the worst person I had ever worked with in my entire career. Slavery is illegal, yes? I called HR and they confirmed that he had no control to make me stay longer, and that I was free to move to my new position. On top of that, they said I was generous for giving 3 weeks notice instead of 2. They coached me on what I should do if the situation continued to persist, and offered backup to talk to him if it kept happening. He was talked to by HR. I was terrorized for the last 3 weeks I was there, as he tried to get me to quit so I couldn't move to that promotion. I contacted HR again and chose not to hand over the 6+ months of records I wrote down of his inappropriate behavior at the time, because I was leaving that position and it could affect my new promotion. I chose to only submit my documentation to support the person after me if they also had trouble, to support firing him. I also had to go to the doctor due to the stress and anxiety levels. I was given prescription medication for migraines so I could make it through the last 3 weeks. I didn't have a single migraine after I left that job. No promotion would have kept me from burning down a terrible boss. Sometimes people just need to be knocked down a peg. Had a door-to-door salesman ring the doorbell. I was nice, opened the door, and stepped outside onto the step. Dogs were going bananas. I let him tell me everything he was selling and then politely told him that I wasn't interested. Went to open the screen door to go back in and he puts his arm out to stop it from opening. I have a resting jerk face normally, so I guess the look on my face was enough, but I was instantly livid with him. Had a dude try this while selling bullcrap books and reached out towards my kid, pointing, not grabbing, and says that I should be concerned for his education. This was after my 3rd refusal. It then turned into me saying, "Get off my freaking porch," and picking up a stick. I was enraged. Dude was trying to convince me that I really needed this overly expensive dictionary CD-ROM thingy. I told him, after much talk, that I literally don't, because I have a few paper dictionaries and internet access. He then screamed, "Well, it's not like you know what's best for you anyways." And he started trying to convince my mom. I took my mom's hand and left. I was 17 at the time. I worked in a gas station and 2 guys walked in and kept looking where all the workers were. I kept an eye on them because they looked shady. Then I see one of the guys put a pack of sausages in his pocket and then come over to the till to buy a Red Bull. I made my coworker, who was my sister, move so I could serve them. And then I scanned the Red Bull and said in the most casual way I could, with my heart nearly ripping out of my chest, I'm not a confrontational person, "Do you want to pay for the sausages you put in your pocket too?" And the look on this guy's face was priceless. I had to repeat myself and he just mumbles, "I'm sorry," and paid for the sausages. After they left, my coworker lost it, said how taken aback she was because she thought I was being rude to the customer before she realized what was happening. She ended up telling the manager about it, and I got a good old pat on the back and a sincere thanks. Doesn't sound like much, but it felt freaking awesome. Dude, I will say when you confront thieves and win, it does feel awesome. I stopped a group of TV thieves when I worked at a big warehouse store. I saw through all their little plans and set up my team to catch them before getting what they want. I'll have to tell that story in more detail when I do a video about stealing. My ex continued to text me like normal every day for 2 weeks after we broke up, something she initiated. Eventually, I ended up telling her, look, you don't want to date, you don't want to be friends, I'm not going to keep making small talk to make you feel better. A week later, she still texted me to wish me a happy birthday. The breakup, according to her, was because I couldn't read the room. This reminds me, my ex broke up with me because I spent Father's Day with my dad. Yes, really, she wanted to hang out at the beach and was mad that I spent the day with my old man. She then proceeded to have a new BF 4 days later, and always tried to rub it in my face whenever we were in the same room. I got sick of it and just stopped talking to her. Fast forward a few years, she finds out my sister took her own life. Well, said ex then proceeds to make my sister's situation about herself and use it to shoehorn her way back into my life. When I realized that, I just stopped talking to her again, and anytime she talked to me, I would just outwardly be cold. Checking into campus housing, when I gave them my last name, fairly uncommon, and the girl says, "Do you mean insert name that rhymes with mine?" It's like, what the freak, are you seriously suggesting I don't know my own name? This is always my experience. Person, misspells my name. Me, actually, it's spelled like this, spells name. Person, no, I'm pretty sure there was an R in it. Me, just with a blank stare. This is my biggest pet peeve. I have people in my firm look up my name to send me an email and misspell my first name in the opening. In turn, I respond by misspelling their first name and signing the email with my name, or I respond back with a shortened version of their name that I know they hate. It's Monday now, and it's happened 3 times today. These people have multiple degrees, but can't pay attention to the details like someone's name. Or, and I'm gonna say this slowly for those in the back, they could be doing it on purpose. Believe it or not, there are some jerks out there that will purposely misspell people's names because they don't like them or they don't feel like they need to learn a name for whatever reason. No thank you, I don't want to work Saturday. Are you doing anything Saturday? No, I just don't want to work Saturday. You contracted me to work weekdays. Anyways, that got me a complaint filed against me for not being a team player. It was my first job after leaving school, so I never really knew how to defend myself from and stand up to office malarkey. At the time, I did do a few Saturdays to appease them, but joined a sports team to give them a reason not to. I have since left for a better job. I worked at a college bookstore while in school and kept working after I graduated. Since I had no more classes, the manager gave me a ton of hours during rush week, which was fine by me, except for the fact that he scheduled me for 11 days in a row, including a Saturday that I told him that I couldn't work ahead of time because I had a prior engagement. When I told him that I wasn't working for 11 days straight with no days off and that I had plans on that Saturday, he asked me, "Do you really have plans, or are you just saying that so you don't have to work all those days straight?" Yes, I do have plans, and even if I didn't, I need some time off. I worked at a big retail place, big yellow tag, blue polo shirts, while at university. One summer, I came up a month early to get some work in. I was a part-timer, but they were short-staffed, so they gave me 40 hours every week. I had previously told them that once school starts, I need to cut down to around 10 hours and only weekends. My first week of school, they scheduled me for 40 hours. I reminded my boss that I couldn't do that, and he said he would fix the schedule on my next shift. My next shift, he gave me a schedule for 30 hours. So I gave him my badge and walked out without even finishing that shift. If they're not gonna respect my time, I'm not gonna respect theirs. Sometimes it's okay to burn a bridge. If you want to hear about how I burned the bridge at my last job, check out the "I Quit in a Blaze of Glory" video here on the Genius channel. After you finish this video, of course. When I was a teenager, I had a crappy part-time job doing telesales for a window company. The boss, Stuart, was an absolute jerk. He was always rude and unpleasant to anyone, and nothing was ever good enough for him. We were meant to work from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m., but he would keep us up for another hour afterwards each night, with no overtime pay. One night I was babysitting after work, so I told him that I absolutely must leave on time. He said, "All right." Slightly before 8 p.m., a girl came for a job interview and they went into a private room. 8 p.m. came and went and Stuart did not come out. Eventually, around 8:30 p.m., I popped my head into the interview room door and said, "Stuart, you said I could leave at 8 p.m. It's now 8:30. I need to go." He said, "Fine, leave." The next day I went into work, Stuart immediately fired me for embarrassing him in front of a potential employee. A few days later, a friend, Mike, from the telesales place called me and said that Stuart had been fired. He, Mike, had been made boss, and that I could have my job back if I wanted it. I went back to work and there was Stuart shamefacedly sitting with the other telesales operators. Apparently he had begged for and was given a job in telesales as an operator after being fired as the boss. He was so embarrassed that he couldn't meet our eyes. Needless to say, he remained friendless the entire time he worked there. Hell yeah, screw bosses like Stuart. I had an awesome female boss when I worked at a call center, but she quickly got a better job elsewhere and was replaced by what I assumed was a 40-year-old frat boy. Dude sucks so bad that I quit on him, and to this day it's the only place that I ever quit without putting in my 2 weeks. Also, icing on the cake, a few years later I saw him working at a warehouse store that I used to work at. Guess he wasn't good enough to be manager. I work at a job where I work a week on and a week off. After my week of work, I legit had wedding stuff to do, but we were in a tough spot last month, so I worked 3 extra days, just to help out. I told them after that I'm busy. Well, 2 days later, I get a call from my boss. Boss, hey, I need you to work tonight, alright? Me, I can't, I'm busy the rest of the week. Excuse me? I said I can't, I'm busy the rest of the week. Busy with what, huh? Drinking and partying? What? Who said anything about drinking and partying? My boss legit couldn't wrap his head around the fact that we have lives outside of this job. He legit threatened to not give me my time off that I requested over this. Basically called me a sack of crap for not pitching in. I just worked 3 days overtime, so 10 days in total. I called him out on literally everything he said and he backtracked on it and even apologized. Then says, "You realize I can write you up over this, right?" I said, "Write me up for what? Being busy on my week off? Yeah, that would be dumb." My boss, "Yeah, it would." Get out of here with that crap. What's funny is since that conversation, the word has gotten around about our conversation and apparently he told everyone that he caught me in a big lie about being busy when I wasn't. And that he put me in my place and gave me a stern talking to because I disrespected him. He never caught me in any lie because there was no lie to tell. I also never disrespected him. I made it a point to stay calm as freak during that whole conversation, and to talk to him with respect. I feel like he just wanted to look like a macho boss, but he's going around making it look like he caught me in some big lie that isn't true. I mean, he even apologized. What's sad though is I told him that it sucks to put 5 years here and he basically told me I'm worthless just because I couldn't work one night. That's not what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what you're saying. Otherwise, you wouldn't be saying I'm sorry and how can I make it right? By treating me with some decency? How about that? It's crazy to me that it's hard for my boss to believe that after a week of work straight, we might have some crap going on in our own life. It's like in his head, everything is about this job. Sorry, man, but some people have lives outside of work too. We dropped our dog off at the groomer for her usual trim. When I returned 3 hours later, the receptionist returned with a dog that, while adorable, was definitely not our dog. Not the same breed or even the same size. I chuckled and said, "That's definitely not my dog." To which the receptionist thought the appropriate reply was, "Yes, that's Miley. That was her name, but not the same dog. I think I know what my own dog looks like, miss." Well, that's her. If you don't like the cut, you can discuss it with the groomer. That dismissive comment immediately made me lose my patience. Hey, get out from behind that desk and take this dog. We will go back there together and I will show you which dog is mine. I am not going to waste another breath arguing with you. Let's go. I found our Miley. It was the dog that was excited instead of confused when they saw me. I ended up getting that grooming for free. I was a CSR for a popular pizza chain and was handed a phone with an angry customer on the other line. They were complaining about having their pizza messed up, and I asked them what they ordered. Over the next few minutes, their story kept on changing. At first it was the sauce, and then it was the toppings, and then they were missing a side. I called them out on it, and I told him to go scam some other restaurant. Needless to say, he got only one F-bomb in before I hung up on him. My one rule of thumb is to never disrespect the people that handle your food, because you just might end up with some extra ingredients if you piss them off. When I found out about my ex-husband's last affair, he had several, I told him to open his iPad and start looking for a place to stay, as he sure as hell wasn't going to be staying in the house. He sat there and just looked at me like I was joking. I said, "Your fingers aren't broken, start typing away and find a place. I can either pack your bag for you and it will be done in 3 seconds, or you can pack it yourself." I said, "You have 3 choices, the car, the gutter, or find a friend." He then stood up and made his way to the bedroom to pack. Said he can stay at a friend's house. I said, "I don't care where you stay, it just won't be here." He moved in with the last affair that he had the following day. Yeah, that would be the day I quit my 16-year-old job, because they informed me that the money earmarked for my recovery from a work-related stress was for other people who might need it, and I would have to start paying out of pocket. After 10 minutes of chewing the HR rep out over the phone about how I was done and how horrible that place had become, and how I never wanted to see or hear from anyone there again, I got, "So what time will you be back in the office?" All I could do was hang up the phone, thank the therapist I could no longer afford, and go home. I never set foot in that office again. It was frankly one of the best days of my life, but a definite did I stutter moment. I was working at Wally World and a customer was on his phone from the start of the transaction. Do not do this. Placed a big package of toilet paper on the belt. I told him that it was $10 even. He was still on his phone and handed me a $10 bill. I gave him his receipt and he walked away. Right before he walked out, he noticed that I didn't give him any change and he tried to argue with me that I didn't tell him that it was $10 and he wanted a refund. I sent him to customer service because I couldn't give him a refund even if I wanted to, and he mumbled under his breath that I was a dumb bee. I replied, "It's not my fault that you were on your phone." He turned his head and said, "What did you say?" I slammed my hands down on the countertop and said loud and clear, "I said it's not my fault you were on your phone." He took a step back and left, and I went on my break. Worth it. Not me who said it, and it wasn't in a rude context, but I went on a date with the guy and tickets were cheap that night. As I was pulling out my wallet to pay for my ticket, he stopped me and says, "Nah, I got it." I asked him if he was sure and he says, "Did I stutter?" What makes that funny to this day is he did have a stutter, so when he said that, it was smooth as hell. Cosplayers of Reddit, what's the cringiest interaction you've had at an event? By the way, there's going to be a lot of character names in this video. I apologize in advance if I say them wrong. Was cosplaying Black Cat from Spider-Man. It was a very tight and form-fitting costume, and I opted not to wear underwear because you could very clearly see the lines in the costume if I did. Had some guy come up behind me and unzip my suit, which wouldn't have been so bad if the zipper didn't go all the way down to the bottom of my butt. For 10 seconds, my pale back and butt were very exposed. Dude, this is 100% not okay. Yeah, and the security was non-existent. It was just staff, mostly female, and nothing was done. It was a cute little con, and it was in its first year, I think. They didn't know what to expect, and it probably wasn't that. Unless you're going to a major convention, I'd expect security and staff to be pretty bad. I would assume most of the budget would go to securing talent for the cons, so the rest is a free-for-all. But screw the guy that did this to this cosplayer. I witnessed a sussy bear cosplay that is associated with kidnapping children throw a little girl over his shoulder and run off. Little girl was fine, but later told me and the group that we had been dancing with she didn't know the guy, so that's pretty sus. It was probably some idiot being in character for laughs. That said, he's lucky he didn't get killed. Jesus, dude, you're going to pretend to kidnap a child? Yeah, this type of behavior at cons is all too common and needs to stop. I think it's gotten better over the years, at least I hope it has, but being in character half the time feels like an excuse for people to be creepy or jerks. Looking at you, weird Deadpools. So I went to my first con a few years ago. I wasn't brave enough to dress up, so I wanted to take pics instead. I saw a really amazing Doctor Who cosplay, so I asked him for a hug and a pic. He was really enthusiastic about it, and we had a pic ready to go until I heard a gruff, "Hurry up, other people want a hug too." This large middle-aged lady in a tight tank top was giving us this glare. Legit, the cosplayer went from happy to miserable as soon as we took the pic. Like, holy cow, these cosplayers aren't props, they're people. Don't demand physical contact, you have to ask. He definitely didn't give up a hug for her. On the bright side, this year I will be doing a dress-up cosplay, and I hope that it'll be fine. I dressed up as the 11th Doctor at San Diego Comic-Con one year, and I saw a vendor wearing a fez, and so I said, "Nice fez," in passing. But I thought he didn't hear me, so I just walked by him. But then I heard a sonic screwdriver noise from behind me, and it was the guy with the fez, and I used my sonic to signal back. It was pretty awesome. This was kinda cringy and hilarious. So at my first con, I was dressed as Silk Spectre 2, comic book version. I was still using my cane because I was only a year out from my accident. This guy decides that obviously I'm his one true love or something, and I'm not able to hustle away fast enough to escape easily. I lose him a few times, but he keeps popping up and hitting on me, and making comments about how I should have been Silk Spectre 1. This is at least 2 or 3 hours of this Romeo following me around. Well, somehow I managed to lose him, and I end up asking this beefy old dude if he minds that I take the preoccupied chair at his table, since my hips and legs are acting up. Half an hour later, we are chatting and having a good old time when my Romeo shows up. Romeo looks at me, Romeo looks at beefy old guy looks at me, and I guess I must have looked scared or creeped out or something, because the beefy old guy stands up and leans real close to Romeo's face and says, "Can I help you with something?" Romeo screws off. I eventually get up and walk away when the table gets busy. Then I glance at the banner above the table as I walk away. Beefy old guy was Lou Ferrigno. Dude, I absolutely love con stories like this. I remember another time when I was at San Diego Comic-Con, I was just looking at some random DC figures that were supposed to come out later that year. To my surprise, some dude stands right next to me looking at the same figures. So I kind of catch him out of the corner of my eye, and when I turn to look at him, it's one of the goats of comic book writing, Jeff Johns. My stupid face asks, "Are you Jeff Johns?" And with a smile, he responds, "Yup." I told him that he was a huge inspiration to my writing, and I got a pic. Dude was super cool, even if Snyder Bros would tell you otherwise. I was cosplaying a popular children's show character, Buster from Arthur. A mom tried flirting with me in front of her child after taking the photo. "What you doing later? Wanna grab a coffee?" But the worst thing I've seen? This guy fully walks up to this girl and cups her booba. He wanted to see if they were real. I don't get why there aren't more people getting punched in the face at these cons, because that's exactly what I would do if some random person came up and groped me. I've never been to a con, I'd love to go and cosplay, but I'm afraid of people doing stuff like that, especially after reading this thread of some of the stories. Those kind of things are rare. If you're curious about it, find a friend to go with you. Also, most cons have security and are very clear about harassment policies. They can and will kick out creeps if you report them. Went to a con as Zuko from Avatar. An Aang cosplayer approached me excitedly to talk about the show, but after 10 minutes, pulled out his phone and wanted me to read his X-rated Avatar fanfic. Proceeded to tell me how long he had been working on the fanfic and how he was planning out the rest of the story to have books like the show itself. This thing looked to be novel length by this point. I politely excused myself and left. But this guy later found me on Facebook and sends me NSFW Avatar fan art every now and then. Okay, this is a PSA for all spicy content enjoyers. Some of y'all really need to learn when and when not to talk about spicy content. Learn to read the room, as some would say. I love me some spicy content, but I'm definitely not talking to a person I just met about those interests. Come on, y'all. I had some small cake pieces with me for friends, carried it in an open plastic box in my hands. In the tram to the convention, I met an older lady. We started talking about my costume and what all these funny looking people were here for and so on. While I explained it to her, she was suddenly looking for something in her handbag, pulled out a small plastic spoon and helped herself to my cake while listening to me. I was too confused to say anything and let her finish. I even jumped out of the tram a station earlier because I was worried about more of the cake being eaten. It's a weird story, but looking back now, I should have offered her more. I don't know what it takes for you to eat a stranger's cake in a tram without asking first if you can have some. This is just bizarre. Makes me wonder what her life looks like. Maybe she eats from other plates and tables at restaurants too. Joey doesn't share food! Can I be the cringe? I cosplayed as Naruto when I was 13, and a Sasuke cosplayer who was 14 quote-unquote made out with me, which was basically biting my mouth. It went semi-viral on YouTube to the point where I was offered money. I had forgotten about that video until that email, and then decimated my whole YouTube account when I was 15 or 16. Good lord, I was a horrible weeb, and I have so many stories. A few years back, my then girlfriend was cosplaying Cell from Portal at a con. It was mostly great. Everyone and their mom wanted a photo with her. Except this one guy who decided to grill her on how much she really knew about Portal. He was looking at her like he had just found a unicorn. but she was pissed as hell that some stranger thought she needed to prove herself to him. I think he thought it was flirting. Guys, you really need to stop doing this to women. Actually, you just need to stop doing this to anyone. No one should have to prove their fandom to you. And if you are just trying to ask a question, keep it to 1, maybe 2 questions max. If they aren't asking you questions as well, they probably don't want to talk that much. I was cosplaying as Red X from Teen Titans, and I had this 16-year-old girl dressed up as Raven follow me around trying to give me a kiss all day. I was 20 at the time. And no, I didn't kiss her, by the way. I dressed up as Edward Elric. My friend was dressed as Envy from FMA. The show was still super popular back then, and glomping was a thing. Some girl ran up behind me at top speed and jumped on my back. And I'm tall, not short like Ed, and bashed me into a table and brought me to my knees. It was horribly embarrassing and painful. What's glomping? Sounds spicy. Glomping is essentially when someone runs at you full speed and jumps into your arms, or jumps on your back and clings on. Some people even do it without their target knowing it's going to happen, and you get the result of the OP here. It's usually posted around in generic rules listing at big conventions, no glomping, along with cosplay is not consent. There's this YouTuber with millions of followers that got famous for this said glomping. Or at least that's what it seems like. I personally can't stand this creator because I feel like this type of content enables other people to do it at cons. For all I know, they could be a cool person, but they do come off as extremely annoying in those videos. Also, if someone dove at me at full speed, you're getting a Kenny Omega knee to the face. More funny than cringy, but my husband doesn't really attend cons anymore because he feels he's too old for them. Before he stopped going, we attended Anime Central in 2002 in Chicago. We passed by a group of Harry Potter cosplayers wearing striped scarves, and my husband turned to me and said, "It's good to know the kids still like Doctor Who." Some girl asked me to sing a duet in the karaoke room, which I agreed to. 30 seconds in, and I realized that it's some anime song that is sung in Japanese, and it's 8 minutes long. It was the longest and most cringiest 8 minutes of my life while butchering the Japanese language in front of an audience. Not really cosplay, but at the midnight showing of the last Harry Potter movie, I was dressed in a Slytherin t-shirt with my house scarf. I was standing with some friends and some girl came up to me and said that I was everything that was wrong with this world. I asked what she was talking about and she yelled, "Anyone who truly likes Slytherin is a bane on humanity!" I just stared as her friends took her away. At Anime Matsuri last month, I was cross-playing as Prompto, with my friend as Noctis, a much younger Noctis cosplayer. They looked to be around 13 or 14, whereas we were in our mid-20s, came up to us and said that their Prompto really wanted to meet us. We followed this fellow cosplayer over to their group of friends, introduced ourselves to the other Prompto, and took some selfies and had some laughs. Apparently, the kids felt super comfortable around us because they then proceeded to pull out their sketchbooks and show us some explicit fan art they had drawn while loudly describing each spicy scene in detail. Needless to say, my friend and I exchanged a look of abject horror and hightailed it out of there, torn between feeling utterly skeevy and biting down the urge to call their mothers. Obviously, there are kids who wander into the not safe for work side of a fandom, but to have literal children showing me the stuff that they drew in real life was positively jarring. I cosplayed as Skull Kid last year. I don't know how it is at American Comic-Cons, but in my country there is a lot of people with signs like free hugs, and sometimes they do it without asking. If this wasn't cringy already, since I 3D printed my mask, the pointy ends were, well, very pointy. When some weeb hugged me without asking, they usually got stabbed by the mask and laughed in an uncomfortable way and ended running off after the hug as soon as possible. I was dressed as Mermaid Man from SpongeBob, and I went up to a table to buy a poster, and this guy was like, "Hey, there's Barnacle Boy here." I said, "Where?" Because I saw no Barnacle Boy at the con yet. He said, "You." And everyone laughed because they didn't realize I wasn't Barnacle Boy and they thought I forgot what my costume was. Screw that guy, I was Mermaid Man. Went to a con with my girlfriend, who was dressed as Black Canary. I was Green Arrow. Naturally, some people asked of pictures of us or with us. Alright, cool, no big deal. What was weird was the number of guys that wanted a picture with just her. One guy even came up, asked if he could take a picture with us, and after we agreed, he handed me the camera. Oh, okay, I see what's happening here. But the cringiest moment was this one guy, maybe 20 years older than us. He asked for a picture of her. We were used to it at this point, so it's whatever. Then proceeds to spend about a good 60 seconds taking the photo. I don't know if he was taking multiple photos or if he was trying to get the perfect booba picture or what. But ain't no way it takes a full minute to take a single photo on a cell phone. Still, the day was super fun and hopefully we get the chance to go back in the future. Man, I wish I could say that cons don't have the creepy guys that take photos, but they are out there and they usually look like the mental picture of the creepy guy that you have in your head. I go to Dragon Con with my wife and like to take photos. Sometimes when I ask cosplay couples for a picture, the guy will usually say, "Did you want me or just her?" And I'm like, of course I want you, come on. I always feel bad for those dudes. Like, how many skeezy guys must be coming up and asking for pictures of just the girl? What a weird thing to do. See, I told you, some weird dudes with cameras at every con. I dressed up as Rose Quartz from Steven's Universe, and a neckbeard type guy sort of dressed as a character from the same show approached me by coming up right behind me and said, "Rose, you're my waifu," while I was talking to a vendor. He had the greasiest hair I've ever seen and really bad BO. He asked for a picture and I said okay, and then he asked me to pose like I was kissing his cheek, and I said no. He got upset and said that I had to because he loved Rose, blah 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 blah, and I didn't know how to disengage. Funnily enough, a Pearl cosplayer intervened and told him to beat it. I've never seen Steven's Universe, but if this is how all the characters act in the show, this is a pretty funny interaction. I dressed as Junkrat for a con, and at the time I had no idea how many kids played Overwatch. So for the entire day, all I got was 10-year-olds shouting references and wanting photos with me, and their parents giving me really strange looks. I cosplayed Frankenfurter from the Rocky Horror Picture Show at a Comic-Con about a year ago. I had a lot of pleasant interactions with other cosplayers during the day. Lots of, "Ooh, I love that movie," "Hey, do the time warp," sort of conversations. A few people hit on me. I'm a woman in fishnets and a corset at a Comic-Con. I was expecting that. Nothing too weird or uncomfortable. And then there was this one dude and his friend. They kept following me around, talking to me about weird personal topics and getting far too handsy. Eventually I started to get nervous, so I excused myself to the bathroom. I just wanted to distance myself from them a little bit. As I go to leave, the guy goes, "Wait! Before you go, can I get a picture?" Okay, fine, just take the photo and then leave me alone. So the guy grabs me, picks me up and throws me over his shoulder so my butt is sticking up in the air, in fishnets and bikini bottoms. And his buddy takes a photo. Then he drops me back on the ground and the two guys take off. It all happened in about 10 seconds, so I barely had time to react. Some guy dressed as Deadpool helped me up and walked me to the security booth to report the guys. But nothing came of it. So that was weird, cringy, and terrifying. I don't cosplay Frank anymore. Dude, I hate this and screw those guys. I hate how people have the ability to just ruin something for people by their actions that they make. Shout out to Deadpool for helping out the OP. Oh man, myself and a few friends occasionally go to cons just to hang out, drink, and buy some merch. But I'll never forget a local con in the early fall of 2008. We usually never go in cosplay, but Guru Login was still in a fever pitch of popularity at the time, and one of my friends was really big on it, and went dressed as Kamina while the rest of us went in regular clothes. It's worth noting that said particular friend is a decent looking 6'4" fellow and was training for a marathon at the time, so he pulled off a pretty damn Kamina. This turned into a day from nerd hell. From the moment we walked into the main hall, he was assaulted in nearly every manner by girl and guy alike. Tons of people wanted pictures with him or of him posing. Endless pictures, and countless times random girls, and a couple of guys, would run out of nowhere and jump onto him, which resulted more often than not, him nearly dragged to the ground by those random attackers. I can actually still remember to this day, one girl screaming, "Kamina-san, I love you!" as she flung herself at my friend. He did his damnedest to be nice and friendly for the pictures, while the rest of us spent more time acting as impromptu bodyguards for him than enjoying the convention. Needless to say, he doesn't care much to cosplay these days. I will say cosplay is fun, but you have to mentally prepare for it. I did a group X-Men cosplay one year, classic cartoon X-Men, and people loved it. We took a bunch of photos, but one thing that I wasn't prepared for was the people in my group wanting to shop and get free stuff. I was in cosplay, I wasn't at the con trying to hold anything other than my cosplay props. Needless to say, there was a little bit of tension in the group after group cosplay day. The only time I ever cosplayed, I cosplayed as one of the Love Live characters' school uniforms. Blazer, white dress shirt, really short skirt. Literally 5 minutes after showing up to the convention, I turned around on the escalator and caught the dude behind me trying to look up my skirt. Let me go ahead and share my own personal cringe story that actually involves me. Now, I often consider myself someone who can talk or have a conversation with anybody, but it's usually in a chill and comfortable setting. San Diego Comic-Con is neither of those things. It's hectic and crowded. This cringe interaction happened a few years ago. I was randomly walking by a booth and I saw this cosplayer that I follow on social media. She wasn't currently talking to anyone, so I figured why not try and start up a conversation. So I decided to ask her about cosplay, and at this moment she was wearing a green version of a Playboy bunny outfit, which is a pretty common thing at cons, but they're usually combined with a character. I tell her that I enjoyed her work and I was curious if she planned on doing any DC comic characters in the future because I haven't seen her do many. It's at this moment that I want to say she responded with a kind of sarcastic maybe, but that's when some dude wanted a picture with her, so I just said bye and left. I personally felt like the convo was a bit awkward, probably because during the whole conversation I was telling myself not to be the guy that overstays their welcome, which you see a lot at cons. So I just tried to make a quick conversation, which was bad. Anyways, I end up getting on social media later in the day and I see that she posted a photo of herself at the con. Turns out the Playboy bunny outfit that she was wearing was a version of Poison Ivy, a DC character. She even had a small little plant-like prop with her to show that she was Poison Ivy. I just completely face-palmed when I realized what I had asked her earlier in the day, and it made sense why her response felt kinda sarcastic. Definitely not my brightest moment.
People who have accidentally caused the death of another person. What happened? When I was around 4, I was inappropriately touched by my cousin who was babysitting me. I told on her, and she took her own life. I posted this before in more detail, but the truncated version is when I was 16 years old, I hit an 87-year-old man after he ran a stop sign. I was with him holding his hand when he died on the sidewalk. He had a heart attack. They weren't able to determine if he had the heart attack before the accident, which would explain why he blew through the stop sign, or if he had one as a result. His family was very gracious, and I am very grateful for them. His son called me the day after it happened, and told me his mom had died 6 months prior. His dad had been very depressed, and while they were sad he died this way, they were happy to think their parents were reunited. I was dating this girl that was a little dysfunctional due to having been a victim of CSA by her grandpa and nobody knew about it. I noticed some red flags and got her to open up and tell me about it. After we broke up, I told her mom she should stop inviting grandpa over to Thanksgiving dinners due to the SA. The mom called me a liar, but after asking the other daughters and cousins about it, they confirmed it was true and that they had all been inappropriately touched too. After word got back to grandma, she said, "I'll take care of it." Fast forward a week and grandpa is dead. Apparently grandpa had a lot of serious medications he was taking and grandma messed with the dosage which killed him. His death was ruled natural cause and nothing ever happened to grandma. It was my mother-in-law's birthday and her daughter and son-in-law had dinner for the event at their place. My wife, 3 kids, and I drove out after work. As we pulled up to their cul-de-sac home in the dark, I saw something odd in the grass between the sidewalk and street near their mailbox. When I got out, an old man, about 80 years old, called over to me asking if I wouldn't mind helping him up. Said he had been out for a walk, stumbled, and been in that spot for about 45 minutes. My wife and daughters went inside the house. My then 12-year-old son stayed with me while I helped the man up. Wonderful guy, started saying this was the icing on the cake for his day, as he had fallen asleep early afternoon on his couch with a lit cigarette, which caught the couch on fire. Fire department came, put the fire out with little damage, and moved the couch to the curb when they were done. By this time, my brother-in-law had come outside with us. We walked the man back to his house about 5 doors down. During our trip there, he regaled us with stories of him in the Navy during the war, and I'm ashamed to say I can't remember which war he had said. He made special not to talk to my son about how wonderful it was that he was helping. Introduced himself to us as Bill, said he was the last unpaid bill. Thought that was pretty clever. As we made to leave, he asked if we would bring his couch from the curb back up to the house for him. Not sure why he wanted it, didn't ask. So my brother-in-law and I moved the couch and set it next to the house outside of his garage. We wished Bill well, then headed back to the house for dinner. When I got in, I noticed that my shirt smelled of burnt plastic. Brother-in-law gave me a sweatshirt to change into, and we had a great birthday celebration before I and the family left about 2 hours later for home. Around 2:30 the next morning, our phone rang. My wife answered, and I pretended to be more asleep than I actually was so I didn't have to deal with the bad phone call in the wee early hours. They're very seldom about good things. It was the police department from the town my brother-in-law and sister-in-law lived in. They asked me questions about my activities the previous evening while I was at their house. The couch reignited and burned Bill's house down, killing him in the process. The police grilled my brother-in-law, examined his arms, then called me. I don't think I slept well for over a month afterwards and couldn't get the tragedy out of my head for a long time. I should have known from the smell on my clothes that it wasn't safe to move that couch. I should have put the pieces together, but I was just too interested in getting back to my family to celebrate. Nothing more ever came of it, but I'll never get rid of the knowledge that if I hadn't committed to one simple action that I performed, then another human being would not have died. I was relieved when my sister-in-law and brother-in-law moved a couple of years later because I hated seeing that empty lot every time I went to their house. This was maybe 11 years ago, but to this day, about once a year around my mother-in-law's birthday, my brother-in-law and I still have a toast to the last unpaid bill. Turned left into my sister's driveway at 3 a.m. A guy on a Harley was doing 60 miles per hour in a 30 with no headlight. My half-ton pickup left 4 feet of skid marks from being pushed back by the force. I still remember seeing him do mid-air somersaults. This was 1976. Dang, that guy was fully responsible for his own death. You just happened to be there. Lucky he didn't take you with him. It's a shame, but double the speed limit in the middle of the night with no lights? 100% his fault. War survivor from Chechnya 94 to 96 war. I told a girl, maybe 17 years old, to run out from the apartment building because I was so sure it was going to collapse. It didn't collapse, and she ran out into a hail of gunfire and died. I was so scared that I stayed in the building and it just never collapsed the entire time, so I left out the back. I often think about that. It was such a quick decision. She was right near the door. I was on my way out because the building felt like it was shaking, and I saw her and said, "Run out, the roof is gonna fall," and she ran out in a hurry and got blown apart by gunfire, shrieking in pain until she was hit again and presumably died. I wish I didn't tell her that, obviously. It still sort of haunts me to this day, especially her screaming. But I also know that I made the decision in goodwill, trying to save her life. And to be fair, the building really felt like it was going to collapse, and everyone was running out, not just me. Anybody would have told her to run as well. Nobody knew they were opening fire on the building. I know it sounds like lame justifications, but it is all I can think of to help ease my mind. Anybody would have done the same. I hope at least. I was supposed to meet a friend ahead to soccer practice, but he wasn't there when I got to where we were supposed to meet. I got impatient and decided to head to practice myself. He never got there, so I assumed he was sick or something. 2 days later, my mom told me he got hit by a car and died after running out in the street to get a ball he was kicking while waiting for me. The timing of things seems like if I had waited just a minute longer, he wouldn't have had to wait for me and would have lived. I was driving from a friend's house last November on a road I've driven a million times. I knew one area was particularly dark at night because the city hadn't replaced the streetlights in over a decade. The dark area also crests a hill in a residential area between 2 crosswalks that are far apart, so people cross the road at the top of this hill. Knowing all this, I still never saw him coming. There was a huge thud and my window was cracked all the way across. I turned around and saw him lying motionless on the sidewalk. It was late and no one else was there, so it was just me, parked on a side street, and this body. I checked his pulse while I was on the phone with 911, but couldn't feel anything because I was shaking so badly. This was maybe a quarter mile from the hospital, so the paramedics were there before I even realized what happened. They put him up on a stretcher with this strange device that I later found out was to automatically compress his chest. The cops showed up and I finally saw my car with the flashlight. There was a large chunk of flesh and blood caught on the side of my car. I passed my sobriety test and they took me home. He lived for 3 days before dying due to complications of the accident and was never conscious during that time. I found out through a friend of mine who's the editor at a local paper that the police were still considering charges. Also how I found out that he died. I was obviously a mess about the accident, but also the possibility of involuntary manslaughter. After the officer called me to tell me officially that he died, I consulted a lawyer and was basically told not to talk to the police again and to let them conduct their own investigation. 2 grueling weeks later, I got a phone call at midnight from the officer who gave me my sobriety test. He worked 3rd shift. He told me that the guy was incredibly intoxicated and basically stepped into oncoming traffic without paying attention. With that info, I wasn't to be charged and I could go pick my car back up. The relief I felt was indescribable, but also terrible that I could feel so great in a situation where someone died. What made that feeling the worst was that the officer told me the family of the guy were super concerned with how I was doing and that they wanted to tell me they didn't blame me. He was 24 and had just graduated college. It was his last night in town before going back to his hometown. I go to his Facebook page every once in a while just so I don't forget what he looked like. I'm at least partially responsible for 3 deaths. So I'm a weather forecaster. A few years ago, I was forecasting for Afghanistan. Now, we were doing these forecasts from a base in the States, which means we had to coordinate our forecast with someone who was deployed to Afghanistan. Sometimes the downrange forecaster was really experienced, other times they weren't. It was a mixed bag. Anyway, I had been forecasting for at least 2 years before this incident. I was familiar with it, and I was actually in a supervisory capacity, simply overseeing all of the forecasts going out in my zone. Well, one day, I was talking with one of my forecasters about the potential for large hail and how I'd like him to put that in his forecast. Now that's a big thing to put in a forecast because of how operationally significant this is. Aircraft must be put in hangars, missions are canceled, assets must be protected, etc. So when it came time to discuss this with the downrange forecaster, he was absolutely against it. He didn't want to brief that to the commander because, again, missions have to be canceled based on what you think will happen. If you're wrong, you've set back a lot of people and wasted a lot of time. So the deployed forecaster tries to argue against it, but his reasoning really just boiled down to, I don't want to brief that. So when I wasn't looking, he essentially just pulled rank on my junior forecaster and forced him to take it out of the forecast. And so we went out to the base with no hail in it, only hinting at some vicinity thunderstorms. Well, when I noticed, I was furious, but I said screw it, we'll let him be wrong. This was the first time I'd ever wanted to put large hail in a forecast. Maybe we were over-forecasting it. Nope. Basically, right on schedule, a huge thunderstorm popped up and dumped large hail on the base. It did a few million in damage to aircraft, injured a helipilot who was pre-flighting his bird, and killed 3 Afghan National Army soldiers who had left on a patrol and couldn't find any cover. They wound up beaten to death by hail. That has always bugged me. They didn't need to die. We knew the potential was there, and I basically just let an incorrect forecast go out that got them killed. 3 lanes wide on my side of the street. I am in the lane closest to the middle of the street. I just get through an intersection and see a car attempting to turn in front of me into a gas station. This gas station entrance is close enough to the intersection I just went through that there is no middle section for them to wait in to turn when it is clear. They inch into my lane across a double yellow line and stop. I quickly get over to my right 1 lane. They inch over into the next lane and stop again. I start to panic. Why are they stopping? What is he doing? I quickly see I can get in the far right lane and move over. This older man driving, I think he panicked. He tries to gas it past me into the gas station. I'm in a Dodge Dakota and they're in an old Chevy truck with rack seating. I slow down as much as I can, but there is no time. I T-bone them and my car basically slams them into a concrete pole. I stop a couple of feet from a concrete wall myself. I get out of the car with my adrenaline on full. I'm not even sure if I'm hurt or not. I can't feel anything anyway. I stumble over to their car to see if they're okay. The looks I received from this old man and his wife still haunt me to this day. They looked at me like I was the Grim Reaper coming to claim them. Absolute horror. Blood coming down their face, wondering why I did this to them as smoke from the front of their car looms over them like creeping death. The woman died later that day from her injuries at the local hospital. The man later tried to sue me, but I was cleared of any legal wrongdoing based on the investigation that had taken place. They had concluded that I had done everything I could have done to avoid a collision. It was just unfortunate timing that this older gentleman made an illegal driving decision. A decision I am sure he regretted until the end of his days. I'm still messed up from this even though it was years and years ago. Getting cleared legally does nothing for one's own conscience and psyche. My vehicle, whether it was intentional or not, was used as an instrument of destruction that ended up killing a man's wife. I have PTSD flashbacks. If I drive by a similar looking area that looks similar to the accident site, I still get such crippling anxiety that I have to disassociate in order to not lose control. I have severe depression, and I don't know how I function and survive, to be perfectly honest. I've run the gamut of emotions over this incident. I have lost friends, relationships, and isolated from my family. Why? I don't feel I deserve what was taken away from others. I'm slowly killing myself daily over it because I can't find any meaning in it. That's because there is no meaning. It was an accident and I don't know how to accept it and move on. I've done different types of therapy. I've taken medication. I've talked to many people about it and nothing has changed. The reason I write all of this is to please implore all of you to be safe when you are behind the wheel of any motor vehicle. I did everything I could to be careful and something horrible still happened. I can't even imagine being the same level of reckless I have seen other drivers who end up getting away with it with absolutely no consequences. I hope with every ounce of my being that no one ever experiences the type of pain and suffering that has become my everyday life and reality. I wouldn't wish this pain, guilt, or suffering upon my worst enemy. I used to work a strange overnight schedule. 10-hour shifts Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. I try and keep awake the same hours on my days off, especially on Thursdays. This was a pretty rural area, so there wasn't much open at those hours except a gas station that had a tiny cafe area. I didn't want to keep people in the house awake, so I spent a lot of time at the gas station. I'd usually read or talk with the cashier on duty. I think she felt a little safer having someone else there too. One night, a man comes in with a little boy and asks if they can use the bathroom. It's something like 3 a.m. The kid looks sick or uncomfortable. To me, it looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. After they're in the bathroom, the cashier and I look at each other. She thinks there's something off about this too. I went outside to get a description of the vehicle. After they leave, we call the police. The local police passed it along to the county sheriff's department and a local officer came to the gas station. He asked us a couple more questions and we listened to his radio to hear what was happening. A county officer spots the truck and pulls it over. After the officer gets out of the car, the truck backs into it and takes off. The police pursue him. We didn't get a lot of details after that. He crashed or abandoned the truck. The truck was on fire and loose rounds of ammunition were going off in the truck. I believe the boy was somewhere safe because I didn't hear any more about him. The guy tried to swim across a small but deceptively treacherous river and he drowned. That was close to 20 years ago. If I remember correctly, he was the boy's dad but did not have custody. He was recently released from prison and the truck was stolen. At the time of the story, the man had been recently released from prison prior to stealing the truck and drowning. My wife and I were both very sick with the flu. My father watched our 2 small children and even came to sit with me in the hospital. The day after I got out of the hospital, he got the flu and died a couple days later. I still feel guilty knowing that he didn't have to sit with my children or that he didn't have to sit by my bedside, but he did. It helps knowing that he loved me so much that he was willing to put his life at risk to be with me. I just never imagined that the flu could have been so serious to be hospitalized, much less kill someone. I hold myself responsible and I feel guilty for getting him sick. When I was 18, I was working the night shift in a nursing home as an aide. Part of my job was to turn the paralyzed patients every 2 hours to make sure they didn't get bed sores. This one particular resident had late-stage Parkinson's disease, and her muscles and joints were stiff and brittle and she was catatonic. As I was flipping her from one side to another, I applied light pressure to her leg to move her back a bit and this snapped her femur. Given her age and health, the doctors decided that surgery was dangerous and she would have to heal on its own, if at all. Because of this, we could no longer flip her, which resulted in bed sores. She eventually went septic from those bed sores and died of septic shock. I always felt so bad about that. I haven't told many of my friends this story, but sharing it has helped wrap my head around what happened. It was about 3 a.m. on a Thursday last December. I lived in Fort Lauderdale at the time. I was heading back from a party at my friend's house pretty bleary-eyed. I had slept for a few hours and then got in my car. I was running out of gas, so I stopped at a gas station right off of I-95 before heading north to home. A guy walks up to me while I'm pumping gas and he asks for directions. He was older and a bit drunk. He came off as a yachty, and yachties aren't really common in that part of town. I had a bunch of yachty friends, so he didn't sketch me out, but I immediately kind of wrote him off. I told him to take I-95 north. He stumbles off and gets on his Vespa. Scooters are super common in South Florida, and then drives away. I go inside, get a drink, and then sit in my car for a few minutes, waking up before going. I hit the highway and I'm cruising north when I see a ton of emergency lights coming down the southbound side. I remember thinking, oh no, something's going down. I started paying closer attention to the road in front of me, and there were lights in my rear view too, coming up really freaking gassed. What happened next was kind of a blur and is not work safe. There were recognizable body parts in the road. Part of an arm, an upper torso with the head attached, blood everywhere, bits and pieces of plastic and metal in the road, and lumps of flesh or organ or something. I didn't see any of it until I was extremely close, but the image is something that has really messed me up. I called my mom. She said I was incoherent and screaming about blood. Florida Highway Patrol checked my car, which had blood on it but no damage, the next day, and the officer explained to me an older white male on a scooter had gotten on I-95 north. He merged inappropriately and was hit by a dump truck, and his corpse was hit by several other vehicles, including mine. They closed I-95 for the entire morning, well past rush hour. The news article said that remains and debris were strewn across an area the size of a football field. I sold my car and moved. The first 2 months were very rough, but I'm feeling better now, despite shaking at the moment. TLDR, I told a stranger to take the highway. He did so on a scooter. I drove through the aftermath of my advice. 7-ish a.m. on a Sunday morning. I'm heading to work in a small town at the age of 15 or 16. Come over a crest on a hill and have no time to react. T-bone someone making an illegal U-turn in a driveway. All I remember is veering off to the right and damaging someone's stone wall after the hit, crawling out of the wreckage out of breath and stumbling to see if the other person was okay. Their vehicle spun multiple times and landed in a ditch facing away, but driver's side visible from where I originally was. Driver wasn't there. Move along the vehicle and check the other side. Driver is hanging out of the passenger side window with a steady stream of blood from their skull. Bottom line for me is that I ask and implore everyone, please use your seatbelt. My mom is Thai and my dad is American, so I spend most of the year in the US and summers in Thailand. When I was 8, my family and my cousin's family were at the beach in Cha-am. My cousin's son, James, and I had been playing in the ocean for hours by this time, and we were both exhausted. Since we began playing, the water got much more violent with large waves as a thunderstorm was starting. As soon as my parents heard lightning, they yelled for us to come back to the shore, and I just started swimming back without checking to see if James was following. When I walked up onto the sand, I looked back and I couldn't see him. We were much farther out than 2 8-year-olds should have been, and James was too tired to keep himself above the water. I'm not sure what I could have done once I realized I couldn't find him, but I can't stop thinking about it. And when I go back to the condo there, I can't bring myself to get back into the ocean. Everyone responding has been incredibly supportive, and it means the world. I know realistically I couldn't change what happened, but that can't stop me from wishing I could. Thank you again to everyone for the kind words. 2 years ago, my sister was working at a dealership. Her husband and I were spending the day together until it was time to pick up sis from work. So when it came time to get his gal, I took the keys and said I'm driving. He was mad enough that he refused to go with me. When I came back with my sister, he was nowhere to be found, but it was common for him to go on walks to calm himself down, so we didn't think much of it. 8 a.m. the next morning, state police were banging on the door. They told us he was struck and killed by a train while he was sleeping on the tracks. That's not your fault. You didn't let somebody too drunk drive. That's what you're supposed to do. Was skiing with a friend when I was still living in Colorado. We were going a good speed and enjoying the mountain. When we came back onto the main trail, he was still going really fast. I yelled at him to slow down, and an elderly lady ended up merging at the same time as he looked back at me. My buddy is a good-sized guy and ended up colliding with this old woman. The ski patrol ended up grabbing her from the mountain, and she was clearly in a lot of pain. She ended up dying from her injuries a few days later. After her investigation, my buddy and the woman were both in the wrong. He had to pay some fines, but never got any sort of lawsuit.
What went away because of smartphones? Portable MP3 players. I used to work in a warehouse and we weren't allowed to have our cell phones with us. Well, no devices with any cameras on them. We were allowed to listen to music and have one headphone in one ear. Everyone who worked there had a cheap MP3 player for that reason. It's more niche now, but there's definitely still a market for those. Audiophiles also love to have separate devices for several reasons. While iPhones are slightly better about it, Android is actually awful about playing high-quality sound files, and streaming services chew through data if you want hi-fi sound. But a dedicated music player, especially if you splurge and get something like a FiO with the DAC in it, that's the good stuff. Even refurbished iPods have a decently sized market these days, although that's partially due to collectors too. Man, as I get older, I'm kind of happy that I got to experience the different eras of music, from Walkmans, aka CD players, to MP3 players, to now smartphones. To be honest, I love music, but I never really thought about how smartphones could affect the quality. I always thought it was more about the headphones you use to listen to the music. But hey, the more you know. Payphones. One day I was walking my daughter, who was 5 at the time. We came across an old payphone and she asked me what it was. I explained to her and she started laughing and said, "Mommy, they don't just put phones out in the park." It does sound absurd, but we did put them out in parks and plenty of other places. I think the last time I saw one was right outside of the local library. They were the last people to get rid of theirs. The ability to memorize phone numbers. I don't know my spouse's phone number, but I still remember the phone number of my best friend from the 1st grade. Totally had this conversation with my client today. I work with these teens. Turns out many of them don't save numbers in their phones, but end up learning the numbers and who the people are. Their reasoning? If for some reason something happens and they don't have their phone, they at least have the people's numbers by memory. Growing up in the late 70s and early 80s, my stepdad was involved in a lot of politics and labor union stuff. Dude knew pretty much everyone involved with that, in our city of about 500,000. And as far as I could tell, he had most of their phone numbers memorized. You could ask him random names, he'd sit there, think for a few seconds, and rattle off a phone number. This was when you didn't have to memorize an area code, so you just needed 7 digits, but still, it was pretty impressive. It's crazy how much you can remember if you actually train your brain to do so. I used to work retail, and at the time, I could have told you the number to any piece of produce if you needed to ring it up at the register. I also had about 90% of the store memorized, so I could tell you exactly where you needed to go to get something. It's all about repetition. Road maps, calculators, camcorders, privacy. The best part of every road trip when I was younger was when my sister was holding the map and then it got sucked out the window within the first 2 hours of the trip. Every damn time. Standalone GPS units for cars are fairly non-existent now. Yeah, but they seem to be huge for semi-truck drivers. You can go into most truck stops and they're still selling them from behind the glass for a few $100s to over $1,000. It's crazy. They let you put in height, weight, length, and even if you're hazmat. It's not like a TomTom. It has really everything you need to go anywhere in the country. I've never lost service with the standalone GPS. And if you're a local guy like me, you still need to figure out what signs you can ignore and what signs mean you're gonna screw up your whole damn life. It's worth $1,000 all day. The house phone with the cord that you can twirl up while you were talking. And later the cordless phone that you could never find until it rang. I always knew where the cordless phone was and was reluctant to get rid of them simply because they were useful for calling my lost smartphone. Radio Shack and other stores where you would buy cameras, stereos, and recorders. This could be a consequence of internet shops rather than mobile smartphones. Dodgy UFO sightings and the Loch Ness Monster. Don't forget Bigfoot! Phone books, notepads, cameras for everyday people. Maps, atlases, the list goes on. Well, paper notebooks are actually still having record sales. My wife is a list person and she has notebooks all over the place. Using a dictionary to find meanings of words. When I was a kid, my mom would tell me that if I didn't know how to spell a word, then I should look it up in the dictionary. Even as a kid, I thought that advice was silly. How can I find a word that I don't know how to spell? Situational awareness. Drove out on an errand yesterday. Every single person walking, jogging with headphones, mother pushing baby in a stroller, dog owner walking with their dog, were all on their phones and not paying attention to their surroundings. This is actually the best comment in this thread. You forgot about the people actively piloting cars while their eyes are on their freaking phones. T9 texting. Dude, I think I have a vague memory of what T9 texting was and I never bothered to learn it. Would the equivalent today be like swipe texting? That's pretty popular. Printed MapQuest pages. Now that is a blast from the past. I totally remember having to print out MapQuest stuff. More than 10 years ago, I made a list of physical devices that had been replaced by apps on my phone. And here's the list. Narrator here. The list was pretty long, and I kinda just wanted to talk about some of the comments that were attached to the list. Oddly enough, books seem to be the first one to really reverse on going digital. For as much as I like my Kindle for travel, I still much rather have a physical book. See vinyl for music. It's probably due to the eyesore from reading from a digital screen, and the experience of being immersed into picking up a book without distractions. E-readers might solve the eye strain issue, but nothing beats reading print. Just the joy of turning the page to find out what happens next rather than pressing a button to flip to the next page. Or the joy of placing a bookmark to come back the next day. There used to be so many different artistic cover arts. All these trivial things add up to the reader's immersion. Yeah, printed books are such a better experience. I am someone who likes to highlight certain things in books. Mostly just books where I learn things. And I'm sure there are apps that will let you do that as well on phones. But nothing beats just flipping through a book and seeing the bright highlighted paragraphs. It's just so much easier to find important things. One word, encyclopedias. Bar arguments. No. Player X was the MVP in 1984. They're so easily solvable now. A fun 2-hour debate now lasts 9 to 14 seconds. I used to work with this loudmouth guy in the mid-2000s that would spout off made-up facts and figures during our lunch breaks. That grounded to a halt once one of us got smartphones by 2008 and just fact-checked on the spot using Google. I will say this doesn't really work with pathological liars though. They'll just say, well, I did it, or the website's wrong. Actual buttons. Rest in peace, BlackBerry. The need to just pick a random restaurant in an unfamiliar area and hope it doesn't suck. Also being restricted to only listening to what music is on the radio or on a CD in your car. For real. The younger generation will never know the hype of hearing your favorite song playing on the radio when you knew you couldn't just listen to it at any moment. Bonus thing the younger generation will never have to deal with is having to watch reruns of an anime hoping that you get the next episode. I can't tell you how many times that I saw Vegeta from Dragon Ball Z get his arm broken by Android 18 to only find out that the whole show resets back to episode 1. But man, that moment we finally got the next episode was so hype. Reading magazines while pooping. But if you've ever seen those videos about what happens when you flush a toilet, those magazines must be disgusting. At least you can clean the surface of your phone pretty easily. Photo development departments in stores. As someone who used to work in a photo place from time to time, this is probably for the best. You don't know how often people would go into a photo center trying to print copyrighted material, and we would have to turn them away and they usually got mad. Also, there was plenty of people that wanted to get their spicy photos printed at the store too. It was wild. Teens' mental health. I'd like to counter with everyone's mental health. Simply enjoying a moment. I went to a show last night and so many people were watching the show through their phone screens while recording it. In between sets, so many people would pull out their phones and watch TikToks and whatnot. Some even did this while the band was performing. I left my phone in my bag for the entirety of the show. I may not have captured memories, but I felt I was more involved with what was happening than those who couldn't set their phone aside for 5 minutes. It's the truth, and I'm happy I realized a good decade plus ago. I don't know why, but I love watching people take videos of fireworks. Just enjoy the fireworks. You're not going to rewatch the video. Honestly, even at sporting events, I see people on their phones mid-game. Sometimes just videotaping plays, or literally just scrolling through social media. I get unnecessarily annoyed by people recording fireworks. Fireworks are this full sensory experience of sound, size, and sight. It's a feeling in your body even. A phone video won't capture 95% of that experience. There has to be something more than just pointless recording. And fireworks have to be the top one for me. Unless, of course, it's a fireworks show gone wrong and they all explode at once. Now that's awesome. I will say, phones have helped us expose just how dumb people really are. I feel like every year there is a video of someone blowing off their hands with firecrackers. They explode, people. Don't hold them in your hands. The phrase, "you won't have a calculator in your pocket in the real world." Accidentally getting lost and finding something cool that you normally wouldn't have been able to experience. The expectation that you will be unreachable. The privilege of not picking up the phone and the person who called would assume that you weren't there. Nothing like when someone answered the phone and you just had to wave to that person to tell them you weren't home. Those were the days. Just enjoying the moment. Anytime me and my girlfriend are doing something nice together, she always wants to grab a picture or make a post on Instagram. If I kick up a fuss, she'll tell me that she's capturing the moment. But now the moment is tainted with distraction. I have physically wrestled my sister's phone away from her at family gatherings because she was incapable of not doing this, and using it to text updates / pictures to friends and family about what we were doing at that moment. And if you think that sounds like normal teenage behavior, you should probably know that my sister just turned 50 this year. This is a double-edged sword in my opinion because I have 2 aunts that do the same thing. They love taking photos. Not necessarily for social media, but just in general. It can be annoying, but it's also nice that someone is taking photos while everyone else can enjoy the party. Plus, those photos can easily be shared through digital albums. People talking to each other while eating. My father always had his attention on the newspaper during breakfast. And before smartphones, I spent so long reading books while eating that I still in a habit of eating one-handed as though I'm holding a book. Bro, ain't that the truth? Nowadays, people look at YouTube before eating rather than talking to people, or watching whatever's on TV at the moment. Every little thing we do is in our control, and it's hard to control. My sister-in-law's husband is notorious at this. He will spend all dinner with his face in his phone watching stuff, most of the time without headphones on. And often at a restaurant, so she'll order his drinks and meals like he's a 5-year-old. Or if we try to even ask him a question, he'll just ignore it. We'll have a conversation with her, then he'll interrupt whatever it is we're talking about, important or not, just to show her what's on his phone. And if she doesn't immediately answer, he'll say, "Did you hear what I said?" Or he'll just be a supremely butthead and say, "You always ignore me." Now a lot of this is because he gets away with it, and my sister-in-law enables it. And then there's the part where he's just a huge jerk. I got two things I want to say on these comments. One, if you say the phrase my sister-in-law's husband, doesn't that make them your brother? Why not just say my brother? And two, what I think the original comment might have meant was people actually having conversations at dinner, for example, on a date. Things have gotten so bad that people play a game at restaurants where the first person to touch their phone has to pay for the bill. I would say if games like that are having to be created, phones are a problem. Patience. You used to have to look up a phone number, call someone, leave a message, and wait for them to call you back. Everything now is instant. People have completely lost all patience with each other, along with human decency. Knocking on doors when you get to someone's house. In America, that'll get you shot now, apparently. Horizontal videos. I hate vertical videos with a damn passion. My biggest screens are horizontal, people. You are denying clarity for those watching anywhere else outside of their phone. Also, I hate watching videos on my phone. Okay, I don't really have a dog in this fight, but I will say, the one thing that does annoy me about vertical videos is that they don't look nice when displayed. If you don't know what I mean, go check your YouTube sub box at some point, and if you're subscribed to someone who does shorts, the thumbnails for those videos are all lame. YouTube is starting to notice this by adding tabs to separate the content, but it needs to happen a lot faster. Humanity, manners, and the ability to listen to someone who disagrees with you. The coming age of boys that will never know the joy of finding a random spicy magazine. Newspapers. Been in the industry for a while, and it's unfortunately dying slowly. Daily circulation numbers are pathetic. Most store copies are returned and dozens of jobs lost just this year. It's a real shame. People's brains, sanity, drive, and a few other things. In return, we got 24/7 hour tracking. Not a good deal if I say so myself. My ability to drive without getting road rage. Every mother freaker that cuts me off and slows down or nearly swerves into me from the other lane, they're on their freaking phones. People who read books. Not necessarily all of them, but I rarely ever see them around anymore, and it's kinda sad. Imagination. Now I could see how phones do hurt imagination, but I've always had this theory that some people have imagination and others don't. I've always been curious how many substance users have imagination before using substances. I feel like that may be their first experience with imagination because they're usually going on some kind of trip. Conversations. Sure, everyone texts more than ever, but people don't seem to talk face to face. I see so many people standing next to each other looking at their phones, probably texting each other. The smartphone replaced the cigarette. We used to all sit around and smoke and talk to each other. I miss sitting for hours smoking and talking. That era is gone. Glad cigs are basically gone though. Lung disease is terrible, but we all lost convos along the way. I'm pretty sure that type of conversation still exists. People have just replaced cigarettes with other things. Decent games to a degree. The casual gaming genre picked up and moved to mobile, then it began to suck. Think back to the glory days of playing Plants vs. Zombies or Fish Tycoon on the computer. When it picked up and moved to mobile, it didn't immediately suck. Some casual games were mostly the same, just cheaper and touchscreen. Also, some new concepts utilize gyro and touchscreen controls in some cool ways. Doodle Jump, Fruit Ninja, stuff like that. But when data/Wi-Fi connections became more accessible, Facebook browsing games came to mobile. Think Farmville, Dragon City, Candy Crush. The free-to-play model took over, and now you're hard-pressed to find a decent offline game for mobile anymore. The classics are hardly even available, since they began to lack support for the newest Android/iOS update and were steadily removed from the App Store. Try and find Plant Tycoon, the original Angry Birds, or anything awesome you remember from the Advent casual mobile games. It's most certainly gone. It's probably been terribly recreated and made into a free-to-play model now. All I have to say in this argument is Konami, the company that created one of the greatest video game series ever in Metal Gear Solid, said that they were going to focus on mobile games aggressively. When free games like Fortnite are bringing in millions, why bother with great story games, right? It's sad, but true. Ability to speak in younger generations. I have two nephews, 18 and 15 years old. They can't fathom the idea of picking up the phone to call someone, to maybe order food, make a reservation, or even worse, calling your crush's house and not knowing who's going to pick up the phone. The genuine sense of panic they have just thinking about the world with no texting is just as alien to them as the sense of panic for calling is alien to me. To be fair here, I will say I've never been a fan of having to call to make an appointment or something like that. It's not the idea of talking to another person, it's when they ask you a question you don't have an answer to. Like if it has to deal with insurance or some type of bank number that you don't know. I just don't like the awkwardness that comes with it, and they're like, well, we kind of need that, and I'm like, I don't know how to get that, man. That's what I don't like about phone calls. People at the library. Not only has book reading diminished, but people used to go to the library to get online. Now that phones do that, libraries just seem almost deserted. Men having the balls to approach a woman they're interested in. That has nothing to do with smartphones, my guy. The plots of a lot of 90s sitcoms. There is a Sex and the City episode that comes to mind where the plot of the episode revolves around two characters waiting at separate entrances of a building, each thinking the other stood them up. The plot doesn't hold up at all in modern times because someone would have called or texted and they would have found each other in minutes. When two impatient people try to meet, they still end up not finding each other no matter how good technology gets. Character 1 texting, "Where are you?" Character 2, "Where are you? I'm at the entrance." Character 1, "No, I'm at the entrance. Nice gaslighting attempt though," blocks character 1. Character 2, "Tell me where you are right now. Hey, talk to me. Pick up the phone, please. Fine." Man, just thinking about it, if that sequence was in TV, that would be horrible. I think I'd rather go with the approach of the 90s sitcom. One thing I haven't seen on this list, but I think is definitely aided by the rise of smartphones, is customer service. Maybe it's because texting seems to be the younger generation's preferred form of communication, but I swear, customer service has never been as bad as I've seen it today. Also, I worked retail for over 5 years, so I know how much it can suck and how you just want to quit at all times. But I still tried to provide people with helpful service, especially if someone was cool or nice. But nowadays, people just stare at you like they're dead inside and want you to leave as fast as possible so they could check their phone again. It just kind of sucks.
Lawyers of Reddit. What's the dumbest thing you've seen take place in front of the judge? Serious replies only, but some of these are pretty funny. Saw one defense attorney demonstrate twerking during closing arguments of an assault with intent to kill trial. Your Honor, my client is not guilty. Why? Let me ask you this. Have you seen this? Throwing it back for a real one? I rest my case. DUI/DWAI/drug defendants show up to criminal court with beer/weed/F the police t-shirts constantly. During the direct examination of the defendant, the PD kept asking leading questions. After 5 or so sustained objections in a row, the judge had enough and sent the jury out of the room to yell at the PD. During the cross, about 10 minutes later, the judge again sent the jury out to yell at the defendant for trying to tell his story instead of just answering yes or no questions, not to mention he was clearly lying through his teeth. Also, the defendant was recorded committing the crime. So yeah, he was later found guilty. I was in front of a judge for oral argument and the other side, pro per, failed to show up. The judge called him and made him argue against our motion while driving and on his cell phone. The judge spoke for a minute, setting up the arguments for the guy, basically leading him to the core argument and what he should be saying if he wanted to get our motion denied. After a few moments of silence, the guy responds, "Judge, I'm too stupid to understand what you just said." That ended the argument quickly and in our favor. Personal story, I was sued once. Well, they meant to sue me, but actually sued my uncle. Same career. Named him in the documents and served him. Me, being young and clueless, thought I should go to the trial just in case. My uncle told me I absolutely should not. Now, here's where the opposing attorney screwed up. They never once tried to interview or talk to me, or my uncle, or they would have realized their mistake. Day of the trial, my uncle actually made it to the stand. From the way I heard it, questioning was hilarious. Were you working on blah 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 day? No. Please read this payroll statement. Doesn't this payroll statement say you were working? No. Look at this highlighted line. Isn't your name RVW260? Yes. Then you were working. No, this says KVW260 was working. My uncle said even the judge was laughing as he immediately tossed the case. People finding religion in front of a judge at sentencing. The judge would always respond with, "God may have forgiven you, but the state has not." That judge was a boss. Firm, fair, and totally awesome. That's the hardest thing I've ever heard a judge say. One guy I saw said, "Your Honor, I haven't been drinking anymore. I have been clean for 6 months, God is my witness." The judge responded, "Well, a lot of people say that, but the funny thing is, not once have they ever been able to bring him in to testify." The dumbest thing I've seen is a guy show up for not doing his community service in a shirt that said, "I'm not lazy, I just don't like to work." Judge asked him about it, and he said it was his only clean shirt. Everybody had a good laugh, even the judge. Seconds after being served with a protection from abuse order, opposing party flipped off the person who had obtained the order, and seconds after that approached her and asked if they could at least talk about it. Promptly arrested. I'm doing jury selection on a civil case in California. It is going to be a long trial, 6 weeks, so the judge is giving jurors a lot of latitude if they claim any hardship for serving that long. After about 30 minutes of voir dire, which ended up taking 3 days and several panels, one guy stands up and says in very broken English that he can't follow. The judge asks him if he speaks English well enough to render a fair verdict, and he looks confused and says no. The judge thanks him for his service and dismisses him from the panel. In perfect English, accent now gone, he says, "Thank you very much, Your Honor. Where should I put my badge before I leave?" Judge found him in contempt and ordered him to stay for jury duty for the next week. Usually you just stay for 1 day. If you don't get picked for a jury in that day, your service is over. During a plea hearing on a prostitution charge, the state proceeds to give the narrative of events. The SA starts to get a little uncomfortable trying to describe the specific act that led to the arrest. We all know the line he's reading is, quote, "sucked him off," but he's trying to find a nice way to say it for the record. He finally goes, where she then, proceeded to perform, fellatio. As soon as he says fellatio, the defendant stands up and straight up yells, "I didn't do any of that French crap, I gave him a blowjob!" Client said to judge, "Well, that's your opinion. It went as badly as you'd expect." "Thank you, judge. No matter what happens. My objection gets overruled? Thank you, judge. Lose my motion? Thank you, judge. Judge says I'm fat, ugly, and unlovable? Thank you, judge." Unfair dismissal case. My client was summarily terminated for no reason. She recorded the dismissal on a dictaphone. The torrent of misogynistic, hateful abuse her boss spewed at her was unbelievable. He also assaulted her as she was removing the hands-free phone device from her car, repeatedly slammed her leg in the door, causing a fracture, all the while screaming at the top of his lungs, "Screw you, you piece of crap." Suffice to say, we played that tape 1,000,000 times in cross-examination. It was more what didn't take place. I was working for the DA's office, and we had a guy scheduled to appear for a vandalism charge. The guy had a long history of minor offenses, but the judge was in a lenient mood that day, so the guy was probably going to get off light. At the scheduled time, he hasn't showed up. His lawyer tells the judge he hasn't heard from the defendant that day. We wait. 10, 20, 30 minutes. At the half-hour mark, the judge is furious. She angrily tells the lawyer to get out and find his client and get him before her, no matter what it took, or she'd rain heck down upon the defendant. An hour later, the lawyer slinks back into the courtroom. The judge sees him and interrupts another lawyer to call him up to the podium. The poor lawyer proceeds to tell us that the defendant didn't show up because he was actually sitting in jail 2 counties over, having been caught trespassing the night before. Needless to say, that defendant got the book thrown at him. At the end of a DWI trial involving a pretty major wreck, in which the defendant was found guilty, the judge asked the defendant if he had anything he wished to tell the court during the sentencing phase. The guy thought for a second and said, "Your Honor, I'm real sorry. Normally I drive a lot more careful when I'm drunk." Had a client toss his car keys on the defendant table moments before sentencing for his 4th OWI. Judge asked how he got to court. Without blinking, said, "I drove. Why?" Good way to get a quick bail jumping charge for violating his no driving bail condition. We all forget to turn off our phones in court, but I once faced off against a lawyer whose phone rang right while he was in the middle of making his final submission to the judge. Even that might have been forgivable if he hadn't interrupted his submissions to take the call. I swear I was arguing against a preliminary hearing against a defense attorney from out of town, and in the middle of one of his direct examinations, his phone rings and he freaking answers it. "Hello? Oh, hi. Listen, I can't talk. I'm in court." "What? No, I'm in court. I'll call you back." "Sorry, Judge." The look on the judge's face was priceless. Then it was time for him to make the closing argument. He looks at the judge and goes, "One more time, Judge. What were the charges?" "DUI, dude. Just DUI. How did you get through this whole thing and not realize there was only one charge and it was DUI?" This sounds straight out of a lawyer's sitcom, and I would watch the heck out of that. A lot of clients want to speak up, "But Judge, you don't understand." But giving them the look of death and a jab in the ribs usually shuts them up pretty quickly. They're usually pretty okay. I found this gem doing some research one day, quoted from the case. "As is evident from the foregoing excerpt from the transcript, the judge would not permit the appellant to speak to the issue of judicial bias. The appellant was agitated. The judge was, no doubt, frustrated. This exchange culminated in the appellant choosing to disrupt the proceedings by commencing to disrobe. The appellant described her actions to the judge as, quote, a form of nonviolent protest, which would continue until the judge would hear her motion for judicial bias. Wish I was there for that one." You don't often hear about a lot of court cases where people take their clothes off, but the formal language used in this makes it 100 times funnier. I do family law. Told 11 clients in a row that they could be drug tested, 5-panel P-test, you need to be cleaned for about a week. As part of the custody evaluation process, 7 of them failed. Lawyer here, I had a case where I was suing a lesbian on behalf of a former lesbian partner. It was a relationship property case. The one who was being sued put in issue whether they had even been lovers, or whether my client was just a flatmate or boarder in her home for the several years they lived together. I had no idea how I was going to prove that, but it turned out my client had saved all of the soppy love notes that her partner had left on the fridge, most of which were, "I love you, you little squishy oyster," and other ribald descriptions. That issue sunk pretty quickly once the box of those were produced. Sorry, that just sounds so wholesome. I would love to be called someone's squishy little oyster. That makes no sense to anyone except me, and that's why that's so special. I've seen a woman pee herself. Situation wasn't so tragic to warrant it, but she was sent back to jail, so understandable. A man called the judge by only his last name, which is great if you think he'll reciprocate the upcoming fist bump, and a large number of high, drunk, and other people say, "This is bullcrap." Also not a great technique in court like the first two. I've got a pretty good one, so hope this isn't buried. Husband and wife are going through a divorce and are having a custody hearing. Basically, the attorney is representing the father who wants to be able to have some rights to see his son, but mother has already been awarded full rights. Father's attorney is super passive-aggressive against the mother's attorney, really rubbing everybody the wrong way. Eventually, the mother's attorney snaps and quips back, "If he was as good of a father and husband as you claim, we wouldn't be here, would we?" Father's attorney has some dumb reply and the judge starts losing his cool. Another few comments later, and the judge ends the hearing. No adjudication, just takes the filings and demands that the parties get out of his chambers. This wasn't in the courtroom itself. In the hallway, the mother's attorney loses his crap, starts yelling at the other attorney. He yells back. They get into a full-on yelling match in the courthouse. Then the father, who is 230 pounds plus, steps between them to entreat them to chill out, starts telling both his lawyer and the wife's attorney that they are acting like children. People in the courthouse are giving them looks, assistants peeking out of doors, and the wife steps in. "You're both acting like a couple of kids. Soon-to-be ex-husband and I can handle this on our own." Then the couple who was in the middle of a vicious divorce step aside, talk for a few minutes, and walk back. "He's going to take son Tuesday night. You two," he points to the attorneys, "do whatever you need to do with the judge." I don't know what happened with that case, but it warmed my heart to see a father step between the two trained legal professionals and impress his wife so much that they were able to work things out. The sad part? The husband's lawyer saw it as a win for him because his conduct put his client in a position to, quote, break up the fight and show her that he is a great guy. Update, for those asking, this was in 2009. I don't know the final disposition of the case, just that the mother agreed to let the father spend some time with their son. And yes, this is a true story. I will never forget. We had a defendant bust into the court from the local jail. His case was called and he promptly walked up the podium, looked the judge dead in the eye, and crapped his pants, jumpsuit. He knew he was going back to prison and just wanted to cause as much havoc as possible. People were gagging and there was a general sense of, did that just happen? In the air. I'm going to start off with some context. This event took place on the first day of a murder trial in the Hong Kong High Court. Now, the official language used in the High Courts of Hong Kong is English and not Cantonese. The judge for this particular case was British, but the lead prosecuting attorney was from Hong Kong. Whenever he spoke, the judge had a hard time understanding him. To make things worse, the trial and evidence packet composed by the prosecution was a complete mess and did not include an English version. During the opening statement, the lead prosecution attorney decided that he needed to grab his colleague and act out the murder in order to get the message across. This was not pre-planned, and to make a long story short, the judge adjourned about an hour in to postpone the trial in order for the prosecution to, quote, sort out this mess. That was the dumbest thing I've ever seen in a trial, and I can't imagine how desperate the prosecution was to do such a thing. A case where a large gangster-type defendant was accused of slashing the throat of a small, skinny guy. The defense counsel made him wear a large coat to conceal his size, and brought in an interpreter to slowly translate each word of the proceedings because, quote, he had absolutely no understanding of English. 10 minutes into the trial, a cell phone goes off and rings for about a minute. The judge is furious, and the ringing is amplified in the large courtroom. The hearing stops, and everyone is looking around trying to figure out where the sound is coming from. Suddenly, the defendant stands up and pulls the phone out of his pocket. It is still ringing, but only louder. The defendant then yells, "Hey judge, I don't know how to turn my phone off." On a hearing regarding a restraining order requested against him, a man raised the defense of, quote, "She be trippin'." Restraining order granted. God bless General Sessions Court. When I was in law school, my school had a mock trial program that took place at the local county court, where the judges were actual judges, prosecutors, and attorneys from the local area. So one day, a mock trial is happening, and one student, who was a law student but not in the mock trial program, is acting as a witness being questioned on the stand. The person was getting a little too rude acting in character, so the judge, who was an actual judge, admonished him to tone it down. The student didn't listen, so the judge took them to a little side chat and told him he really needs to stop. The student blows up at the judge and tells him that he doesn't have to listen to a petty state court judge and proceeded to verbally assault him. Judge filed an assault charge. Student was kicked out of school for damaging the school's relationship with the local courts, and I would imagine likely never got admitted to another law school, or, if they did, would have a hard time passing the character and fitness test to practice law in that state. This is a much longer story, but I'm on mobile. Anyways, a guy came into court on a pervert charge. His friend is a lawyer who comes into court with a black suit, snakeskin boots, and a bolo tie. It is glorious how slimy he looks. When he gets up to talk to the judge, he says, "I've known John for 20 years and he is a good man. He is not a pervert, sir. I should know, because I am one. I miss working for the DA. Sometimes the criminals write themselves." So at the arrest stage, when cautioned, in the UK, any response you give / anything you say under caution is recorded and given as evidence. One of these guys is arrested for a scrap and kicks off in custody, calling us effing this, C-word that. One custody officer goes, "Sir, calm down. You realize everything you say will be recorded and told to the magistrate?" He replied, "Oh, F the magistrate and the frickin' court. The magistrate is a jerk." Court day comes. I'm called to provide evidence to show that the man was badly mannered and aggressive in nature. Amongst other statements and actions he made, I say, "Your worship, whilst in custody, the defendant did not calm, and custody officers' attempts to calm him by warning him that we would provide what he says as evidence to yourself was met with, oh F the magistrate and their freaking court. The magistrate is a jerk." Well, that was the end of my evidence, and the court retired for a lunch break. The magistrates went to town on him in sentencing. I only have one. Was in court during a sentencing, and the defendant, not my client, approaches the bench with his attorney. The judge begins to go through the sentencing colloquy, and the man says, "F you, judge." The judge, a female, was pretty shocked and just said, "Excuse me?" I said, "F you, judge. Ain't no woman told me what to do in my life. Sentence me to whatever." She just sat there dumbfounded for a second. Then, "All right, fine, Mr. Blank. I hereby sentence you to life in the penitentiary." Well, that just sounds freaking fantastic. Defendant was already doing a life without parole sentence and had this charge pending when he received his first sentence. He knew he was basically untouchable, and no matter what the judge did, his sentence could never get worse. 2 good stories from arguing motions. 1. I was arguing a case should be dismissed because of a decade-long delay. Sketchy opposing counsel says to me, "Where's your authority to show that delay is long enough?" Judge says, "Right here, case dismissed," and points to his file. Number 2, opposing counsel asked if I was crapping him when I said, despite a typo, the motion could still be granted. I crap you not, he cursed during oral argument. When I was a public defender, I represented a woman in felony DUI trial. It was a felony only because her license was already suspended when she got the DUI. Her BAC was .30, yes, not .03, and there were empty vodka bottles rolling around in her car. I found case law that said the state must prove she actually received notice that her license was suspended in order to charge it as a felony. On my motion after the state's case, again after the defense's case, and again after the jury verdict, the judge grudgingly had to dismiss the felony part because the state couldn't prove the woman ever received notice that her license was suspended. The judge made a very clear record, however, that the conviction for DUI was solid and unaffected by dismissing the felony. Whatever, we beat the felony, which was the difference between 4 months in prison and 24 hours in county jail. That's not the dumb part. This woman was knucking futs and swore she wasn't drunk. Bull crap, she was drunk every time I ever talked to her, and no one would dismiss her case. She filed a lawsuit against the public defender's office, my supervisor personally, me personally, the county superior court, and the judge personally. She would show up at the courthouse every day to, quote, read her file and harass the court staff. The judge eventually barred her from coming to his court without written permission. She started wearing wigs and big hats and sunglasses to skulk around his court unrecognized. No idea what happened to her after that. I swear to drunk I'm not God. We had an expert witness testifying about gunshot residue. He was asked about how long such residue would remain on a given surface. His response, before the court, well, I like to say it's like the difference between love and herpes. Herpes lasts forever. A guy was getting sentenced for stealing, and the judge asked him if he had anything to say before the sentence was passed. These are the words he chose to utter. Your Honor, if I'd known they was watching me, I never would have done it. A guy getting sued for millions for a scam car dealership purchase before retiring to the desert with the scam proceeds showed up on the first day of trial wearing a $50,000 gold watch. His lawyer saw the jury noticing the conspicuous display of wealth and got the guy to ditch the watch, which left him showing a bright white line highlighting his desert tan. The jury was then eyeing him as someone trying to hide his wealth, so to hide the tan line, he showed up on day 2 wearing a $30 Timex. I saw one of the jurors point out his own Timex to his neighbor and shake his head in disgust. Unfortunately, the jury never got to decide that case. They'd have creamed him. Once, I represented a defendant in a defamation case. The plaintiff was crazy and self-represented. He also had a bit of a language barrier and claimed to be a doctor of law in his country of origin. His sentences sounded reasonable, but in an extended conversation, it was clear he was misunderstanding longer words. He was so bad during questioning that I got about 3 different opportunities to cross-examine himself just because his story kept changing. The judge also indicated that I should leave evidence objections to him because there were so many problems with everything he did. At the trial, this man was amazing. I wish my client or I had the money to buy the transcript just for sentimental reasons. One of my favorite exchanges was where he cross-examined my client's witness, who said she had seen the plaintiff yelling at the defendant. What was I saying to her? I don't remember. But you still say I was yelling? Yes, I remembered what you were yelling, but not what words you used. So I was just screaming like this, makes screaming noises at the witness, holds his hands up in the air like, got her, and smiled triumphantly at the judge. Another exchange, same trial to my client. So you say you were scared? Yes, you were very aggressive. But why were you scared? You were yelling at me and you're much taller than me. How many people have I killed? What? How many people have I killed that you know of? I don't know. So why would you be scared if you don't know that I've killed anyone? Same triumphant look at the judge. Another time he said to the judge, I didn't threaten her. Don't be silly. In my culture, if I had threatened to kill her, she would be dead. In cross-examination, I asked him whether he had seen a document that had been filed about the case in another court. I told him that the court had made it public. The judge confirmed it was a public document. The plaintiff yelled, Are you saying that you have defamed me too? I also said in closing arguments, Your Honor, it is clear in giving evidence that Mr. Plaintiff had some difficulties with English and did not understand certain words. He may have misinterpreted what my client said. He cannot be relied on for this reason alone. Plaintiff stands up and says, My English is fine. How many African languages does Mr. Rocco know? Tell me. I did the trial pro bono. I don't regret it. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. I love you, you squishy